Let's be honest, this is where the story gets vicious. The sister thinks she lost a fiancé. The parents think they lost a business deal, but none of them realize they just lost control of the one girl they treated like furniture. And the craziest part? When the contract husband gets kidnapped later, she doesn't run. She brings the ransom herself. So this isn't just a he chose the wrong sister drama. This is a revenge arc, a trauma bond, and a love story built on the most unhinged first move possible.
In the grand architecture of the Whitmore dynasty, Elena was a forgotten blueprint, the spare daughter living in the shadow of an idolized sister. But the family's meticulous design was fracturing because the city's most powerful man didn't want the jewel they were offering. He wanted the ghost. The moment Adrian Volkov entered that gilded cage and severed her sister's engagement with 5 words of ice, Elena Whitmore's life was torn from its script. This is the tale of the girl who was invisible until the one man who mattered finally opened his eyes. The champagne was merely a stage prop. Elena watched the delicate bubbles rise, a silent observer of the unfolding drama. The dining room was illuminated for a coronation, which, in truth, it was. Her mother's stagecraft was perfect. Funereal white roses, silver urns, and plates worth more than a common man's life. Servers drifted between the guests, silent and efficient as specters. Her father, Richard Whitmore, lifted his glass to Victoria and Adrian, his voice saturated with the arrogance of a man who'd just brokered a pact with a god. To our legacy, our dominance, and a future that will immortalize the Whitmore name. Elena dissected her sister's smile from across the table. Victoria had mastered the art of tilting her face to capture the light, of summoning a single perfect tear without disturbing her makeup. It was a language of deceit Elena had never cared to learn. The entire table was enthralled. 12 guests in formal attire, all complicit in the lie that this was a union of love and not a corporate conquest. Elena set down her flute and reached for her water. Elena, my dear, do try to look pleased for your sister's triumph. Her mother's whisper was a shard of glass in her ear. Catherine Whitmore's smile was a beautiful mask for the reprimand, for appearances were everything, but her eyes conveyed a chilling promise. We will speak of this later. Of course, Mother. My congratulations, Victoria. Elena raised her water glass in a silent, lonely toast. Her sister never saw it. This was the rhythm of her life. Elena had ceased expecting to be seen around the age of 16, the year Victoria was anointed the family's protagonist, and Elena was cast forever as her understudy. Not beautiful enough, not cunning enough, never enough of anything to command the attention her sister earned simply by existing. Adrian should be arriving any moment, Victoria murmured, a feigned nonchalance in her movements that betrayed a deep-seated fear. His arrival is confirmed. The champagne was replenished. An uncle began an anecdote about a man of influence. A cousin's laugh was a shrill, ugly sound. The entire evening was a script Elena had memorized, and she despised every word. She had encountered Adrian Volkov only once, 3 months prior, at some hollow charity event. While Victoria had hunted him like a predator, Elena had sought refuge in a quiet corner with a book, her customary retreat. He had found her there, feigning a similar desire to escape the suffocating performance of the party. They had spoken for perhaps 20 minutes. He had bypassed the typical pedigree questions. Instead, he gestured to her worn book on landscape architecture and asked if she was passionate about it or if it was merely a shield. Both, she had confessed, and he had offered a genuine laugh, not the polished, hollow sound so common in their circle. They fell into a conversation about green cities, the soul of public spaces, and the crushing weight of concrete jungles. It was the most human exchange she'd had in years. Then Victoria had materialized, a vortex of charisma pulling all light and attention toward herself. And Elena had watched Adrian's expression shudder, his features hardening into a mask of stone. Her sister had claimed his arm as if he were a possession, and in that instant, Elena had vanished once more. She had replayed those brief minutes in her mind more times than she could count, fully aware that Adrian Volkov was a dangerous man. He was a creature of the deep, a shark her family believed they could domesticate with a marriage contract. But for 20 minutes he had spoken to her as if she were a person, as if her thoughts held weight. It was a pathetic scrap to subsist on, but Elena was accustomed to starving for connection. "He's here." Victoria rose, smoothing the lines of an ivory gown that cost more than a modest car. "How do I look?" "You are perfection, darling," her mother soothed. And it was true. Victoria's singular consuming talent was to be flawless, 24/7. Elena heard the low murmur of male voices giving commands in the hall. Her father stood, adjusting his tie, preparing himself to greet the man who could build or shatter empires with a single phone call, his family's most prized acquisition. The man who, if the whispers were to be believed, moved in circles so dark his name was never spoken aloud. The dining room doors swung open. Adrian Volkov did not simply walk into the room, he consumed it. He was tall, dark, and clad in a suit that seemed forged onto his frame. Yet it was not his appearance that arrested the room. It was his presence, an aura of absolute power that declared this entire gathering existed only by his consent. "Adrien, my love!" Victoria's voice was a bright, false note as she moved toward him, her arms outstretched to embrace her prize. He stopped a foot away from her, leaving her arms suspended in the empty air. His expression was a void, and the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Victoria," his voice was flat, devoid of any warmth. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, thank you for the invitation." Elena saw the smug certainty on her father's face begin to splinter. This was not the tone of a man on the verge of betrothal. This was the tone of a man presiding over an execution. "Well, come, sit." Catherine gestured toward the seat of honor beside Victoria. "We have a great deal to celebrate. I will not be staying." Adrian's words were like stones dropped into a silent pool. "I came to address this personally. It felt appropriate, despite the considerable inconvenience." Elena's stomach tightened. She recognized that tone. It was the sound of a verdict from which there was no appeal. "Address what, precisely?" Richard's professional veneer was cracking. "If this is a matter of the prenuptial agreement, I can assure you our attorneys can—" "There will be no attorneys. There will be no prenup. There will be no marriage." Adrian's gaze swept over them, cold and assessing, like a demolitionist surveying a structure he was about to condemn. "The engagement is terminated. As of this moment, any and all arrangements between our families are void." The ensuing silence was absolute. The blood drained from Victoria's face, leaving her a porcelain statue of shock. Her mother looked as though she had been physically struck. Her father's expression shifted from bewilderment to a dark, simmering rage. "You cannot be serious," Richard began, his voice rising before he wrestled it back under control. "Adrien, if there has been some miscommunication, I am certain we can resolve it." "There is no miscommunication. I have no intention of marrying your daughter. I never did." Adrian's words were a brutal, clean strike. "This entire affair was a construct of your family's ambition. I allowed it to continue for too long. That was my error. I am correcting it now." "How dare you?" Catherine's voice was a thin, disbelieving shriek. "You have humiliated Victoria before our friends. You made promises, you were seen with her." "I made no public declarations of marriage. Any announcements made by your family were optimistic at best and fraudulent at worst." His gaze finally settled on Victoria, who remained frozen, her social programming completely shattered. "You are an impressive and capable woman. I have no doubt you will find a more suitable partner, but it will not be me." Victoria's lips parted, but no sound emerged. Elena had never in her entire life seen her sister rendered speechless, had never witnessed her charm fail so catastrophically. It was unsettling. After a lifetime of being cast aside, Elena felt a strange, unwelcome flicker of pity. "This is an outrage!" Richard moved toward Adrian, a foolish attempt to physically bar his way. "Do you have any concept of the damage this will do to Victoria's reputation, to our name?" "I do," Adrian replied, entirely unmoved. "But that is not my concern. Your family inflated a casual acquaintance into a binding contract. That was your gamble. This is mine." "You arrogant," Richard sputtered, but Adrian silenced him with a look. A silent, chilling promise that made her father physically recoil. "I would strongly advise you not to complete that sentence." And with that, Adrian's veneer of civility disintegrated, revealing something cold and lethal beneath. His words were velvet-wrapped poison, a quiet vow to expose every sordid secret the Whitmore family had buried. Richard turned the color of ash, his face a mask of primal fear, but Catherine, a veteran of social warfare, recovered in an instant, attempting to smother the fire with an offer of money. Adrien met the gesture with a look of pure contempt. His cold, predatory gaze swept the room, and then, for a heart-stopping second, it locked onto Elena. He delivered the final blow. The arrangement was dead because Victoria desired a trophy, and he would be no man's ornament. "Betrayal," Victoria whispered, and the word hung in the air, broken and hollow. In that moment, Victoria's perfect facade shattered, revealing the desperate, hollow girl beneath. "You told me I was what you wanted," she pleaded, her voice cracking. Adrian's reply was a surgical strike, delivered with the cold precision of a hangman. "I said you were accomplished." He dissected his own words, drawing a clean line between admiration and affection, leaving her emotionally dismembered. Elena was a spectator to the immolation of her sister's world. A wave of impotent fury colored Richard's voice. "Get out of my house!" Adrian turned to leave, then paused at the threshold like a specter in a tragedy's final act. "One last thing," Catherine hissed. "You have done enough damage." He paid her no mind. His gaze snapped back across the room, finding Elena, pinning her in place. "I need to speak with your younger daughter, alone." The oxygen vanished from the room. Every head turned, every eye fixed upon Elena. A maelstrom swirled across her mother's face, beginning with confusion, hardening into suspicion, then shattering into absolute horror. A raw, unfamiliar venom twisted Victoria's expression, aimed directly at her sister. "Not a chance," Richard declared, his voice a paternal barricade. "You've destroyed one daughter. You won't get near the other." Adriana met the hostility with chilling calm. "I'm only asking to talk." But the unspoken ultimatum vibrated in the air. 10 minutes, or she was gone forever. Every fiber of Elena's being screamed to retreat. Yet something in his unwavering stare held her captive. "Elena, you will not," her mother commanded. Then a small, strange voice, barely her own, murmured, It's all right. Shall speak with him. A strangled gasp escaped Victoria. Elena, you cannot be serious. It is just a conversation, Elena echoed, the words a shield of paper. She rose, unsteady, yet resolved, a quiet insurrection against a lifetime of compliance. After 24 years of yielding, this one act was a seismic shift in her own history. The library, she said to him. Their judgment felt like a physical weight as she walked away. The hallway stretched into an impossibly long passage. The library's immense door felt like a portal to another existence. He followed close behind. The lock's click sealed her past away, trapping her in a room lined with leather-bound deceptions. The pristine, unread volumes felt like another universe from the worn-out novels she cherished. She turned, arms crossed, like a bulwark. I'm assuming you didn't detonate my family's life for a chat about botany. A faint smirk touched his mouth. No, but it was a pleasant discussion, you remember. I recall what matters. His gaze was an inventory, absorbing every change. You cut your hair. Her hand instinctively flew to the short strands, a private rebellion now laid bare. I wanted a change. It suits you, he said, the compliment landing with unexpected force. He moved a single step closer. This is not about power, he stated, nor is it for revenge or some passing fancy. Okay, she breathed out, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Then what is it? He then unveiled the most audacious proposition, presented like a business arrangement, a marriage contract. For 12 months, the conditions were brutally simple. He would gain a wife, she would gain her independence. A clean transaction. Her role? To perform as his spouse for the public eye. Her payment? The capital to purchase her own life. A wild, incredulous laugh escaped her. You are utterly deranged. Perhaps, he conceded, his expression a mask. But I am 100% serious. It wasn't a proposal, it was a perfectly crafted blade, the final vicious turn. That's the most perverse thing I've ever heard. This isn't about them, it's about you. He implied Victoria was a fraud, but Elena was the only genuine article he'd found. We spoke for 20 minutes about parks, he said, his tone clinical. The finest 20 minutes of that whole affair. He outlined his wifely requirements like a strategist. A corporate asset, a beautiful accessory. He required a companion for Gallus, not for his heart. The room seemed to tilt around Elena. And you chose me for this? From a single, ordinary chat? I chose you, he countered, his logic unyielding, because you desire nothing from me. He sketched a life where every interaction was a transaction. In her profound disinterest, he saw an incorruptible honesty. That is quite possibly the saddest thing I've ever been told. Likely, he concurred. That doesn't make it any less true. I'm offering you an exit, Elena. A key, he clarified, to unlock her cage. An escape from this house, her relatives, and her own crushing invisibility. He restated the terms. 1 year of performance art for the means to architect a new existence. The word freedom resonated in the quietest corners of her spirit. This is madness, she whispered, the conviction faltering. He simply urged her to consider it, noting the contract would include an exit strategy. She cut through the pretense. But why me? He met her gaze, a long, silent moment passing between them. Because you looked at me as if I were dull, not dangerous. He explained that the world saw him only as a predator or a prize. A small, astonished laugh broke from her. I was just being polite. Precisely. Precisely. He offered a business card, a formal summons to this preposterous pact. My direct line. Consider it. She accepted. The card's heavy stock felt too substantial in her trembling fingers. Her mind screamed this was certifiably insane, yet a deeper instinct recognized a lifeline, a true escape. Her life had been a gilded cage where her own ambitions went to die. This absurd contract could be the key. You could sense the tectonic plates of her world shifting. If I were to do this, what would you tell them? Why choose me over Victoria? His response was immediate and merciless. The truth, that I chose authenticity over a performance. He observed her, his face a neutral canvas, as if watching the inner workings of her mind. He acknowledged her family's impending meltdown and society's judgment as if they were minor inconveniences. You are miserable, he stated, a surprising note of bitterness in his voice. He framed it as a gamble where she had nothing left to lose. He retreated toward the door. His final words were simple: review the contract, call with inquiries, or incinerate the card. At the threshold, he paused. You have been a ghost for far too long, Elena. It's time for a change. And then he vanished, leaving her at the precipice. The door swung open once more. It was Victoria, her eyes alight with fury. What did he want? Elena concealed the card. Nothing, she lied. He was just apologizing for the scene. Her flimsy lie was no match for the tempest that was Victoria. Her sister advanced, her lovely face contorted by a furious envy. She hissed that Adrian Voloff never apologized, that he was a man of hidden motives, and she demanded the real reason for his visit. As Elena feigned ignorance, Victoria's composure crumbled into raw hysteria, projecting her own deep-seated fears onto her sister. She railed about a lifetime of feeling threatened, accusing Elena of orchestrating this to destroy her. A profound, soul-deep weariness settled over Elena, the fatigue of an actor trapped in a dreadful repeating play. She refuted everything, claiming she hardly knew him. Victoria shrieked back, demanding to know why he would choose Elena. Her hands were balled into fists, trembling with rage. Then came the familiar poison, the old barbs meant to keep her small, calling Elena the invisible daughter, a shadow meant to be forgotten. But for once, the words that always wounded her simply glanced off. In her pocket, the card's solid weight was a new reality, a choice that had already altered her universe. You're not wrong, she retorted, her voice suddenly glacial. I have been a ghost, and I believe I'm done with it. She swept past her sister, leaving the library and its lingering tension behind. She climbed the rear stairs to her room, a third-floor attic cell with space only for a bed and desk, a space designed for someone invisible, and studied Adrian's card. It was brutally elegant, black text, thick stock, and a number that was more than digits. It was a bridge between her current life and another. 1 year. Liberty. Beyond her door, she heard her mother's fury and her father's futile attempts at peace. The entire mansion seemed to hum with the aftershock of Adrian's visit. Yet for the very first time, the turmoil felt distant. Elena felt as if she were hovering above her family's wreckage, observing it with clarity instead of being pulled under. She recalled a book on landscape design, on creating gardens in industrial wastelands, places of beauty that existed only because someone willed them to. A radical thought began to bloom. What if she could be her own reclamation project, a life cultivated from ruin? Elena stared at the number on the card. To call now would be a clean severance, a desperate leap before doubt could paralyze her. The alternative was to await the contract, to be strategic. But strategy had been her cage, the very thing that kept her in a small room within a family that saw right through her. Her thumb hovered over the display. Then she lowered the phone, opening her laptop instead. A decision of this magnitude demanded intelligence. She needed to understand the man behind the public facade, to survey the territory she was considering entering, to know where the boundaries were. She spent 3 hours in a digital freefall. By the end, she had a much clearer image of the man offering her freedom, and none of it brought her comfort. Adrian Volkov's entire dynasty was founded on merciless strategy and perfectly timed risks. Those who crossed him suffered fates that, while perfectly legal on paper, were utterly ruinous in practice. He thrived in the gray areas of the law, a man who understood that what is lawful and what is just are seldom the same. His capacity to dismantle lives was not mere gossip. It was a hard truth for those who dared to verify it. This knowledge would have terrified most. For Elena, however, it offered a bizarre comfort. The calculus was stark and clear. A man this formidable would absolutely honor his word. If she was merely swapping one cage for another, this new prison had a firm release date and a life-changing reward. At midnight, her screen lit up with a message from an unknown sender, an attached PDF. The subject line was simply, "Agreement for review." Elena initiated the download and began to dissect it. 27 pages of dense legalese sent her to Google repeatedly, but the core terms were brutally direct. 12 months, commencing on their wedding day. The agreement stipulated a cohabited residence with separate sleeping quarters, mandated joint attendance at all social and professional events, and demanded complete financial disclosure from both parties. The figure for her compensation made Elena's hand tremble. It also detailed the terms for dissolution, a no-fault separation at 6 months by mutual consent, and non-disclosure clauses forged with the strength of tungsten. It was the most personal yet profoundly impersonal document she had ever seen. A brief addendum was attached. "My legal counsel is at your disposal. You may also retain your own. Take as much time as you require." A V. Elena devoured the entire document 3 more times, highlighting sections, searching for the concealed trap she knew must be lurking within. An escape this straightforward, she reasoned, had to carry a hidden price. But the conditions were shockingly equitable, almost defensive, suggesting Adrienne might genuinely want a partner, not simply a pawn. At 2 a.m, Elena registered the creak of floorboards just outside her door. A soft knock was followed by her mother's voice, entirely devoid of any warmth. "Elena, we must speak." Elena remained perfectly still. After a long, strained silence, the footsteps receded. They would return. The following day was certain to be a gauntlet of familial confrontations, of manipulated guilt and projected blame. Victoria would assume the role of the martyr. Her parents would wield obligation and duty like weapons. The entire family apparatus would mobilize to herd Elena back into her assigned, silent place. Yet for this single night, alone in her room, with the contract's glow illuminating her face, Elena possessed something they could not touch. She had an option. At dawn, Elena brewed coffee before the rest of the house stirred. Seated in the breakfast nook overlooking the garden, she watched the sunrise on lawns manicured by 3 gardeners, her father's symbols of achievement, her mother's proof of social standing. To her, they meant nothing at all. She took her phone and composed a message to the number from Adriana's business card. I have questions regarding the contract. When can we meet? A reply arrived in under 30 seconds. My office, 2 p.m. today. The address will follow. Elena downed the rest of her coffee and returned to her room. She filled a single suitcase, not with everything she owned, but with items that held meaning. A photograph of her grandmother, who passed when Elena was 12, the last person who had truly seen her, a pile of books, her laptop, and clothing her mother had not chosen. She was uncertain if she would need the bag, but the act of packing it was a silent vow to herself. At 8, her mother knocked again with much more force. "Elena Whitmore, you will open this door now." Elena complied. Catherine stood there, impeccably dressed, her makeup a perfect facade, her emotional defenses raised. "We must address last night's events." "There is nothing to address." Adrian broke his engagement to Victoria. "It does not concern me." "Do not feign innocence. It is a profoundly unbecoming look for you." Catherine stormed past her into the bedroom, her gaze immediately fixing on the suitcase on the bed. "What is the meaning of that?" "It's nothing. You are going nowhere." Her mother's expression turned glacial. "Whatever small fantasy you are constructing about last night is now over. This family is in crisis due to that man's actions. You will not compound it with some adolescent theatrics. I am 24. I am free to do as I please. You are 24 and have no funds, no profession, and no comprehension of how the real world operates." Catherine settled on the bed's edge as if it were a throne. "You believe you are a captive here? Fine. Attempt to survive on your own. Let us see how long your rebellion endures when you cannot pay your own rent." This was the very trap Elena had sensed closing around her for years. The bitter, inescapable fact that her freedom came with a price she could not meet. Her income was a pittance, her degree was useless. Her entire work history consisted of positions arranged by her father. Long before Adrian Volov disrupted their gathering, Elena was already suffocating within the confines of her family's warped dynamic. A contract that promised a fortune was the catalyst that ignited her quiet insurgency. Her soft-spoken, "I'll be fine," was a deception she even told herself. A notion her mother, Catherine, instantly crushed, predicting her utter failure. Catherine's order to avoid the man was a final, desperate gambit for control, casting Adrian as a predator in a league far beyond Elena's comprehension. Following their confrontation, the psychological pressure intensified. The very air in her life felt thin. The decision to depart, slipping out at 1:30 in a dress taken from her sister Victoria, represented the definitive severing of her lifelong bonds, an overt declaration of war against her own family. Adrian's office was a monument to subtle intimidation, an edifice of glass and steel that broadcasted immense, unassailable power. Within its confines, a profound quiet amplified the unspoken menace. After a scanner verified her identity, a solitary elevator enclosed her for the journey to the summit. A 40-floor climb designed to amplify his territorial advantage. At the top, she was escorted into a room with a commanding view of the city. Adrian was there, concluding a call in Russian, another effortless display of his international influence. He allowed the silence to hang in the air before turning his attention to her, gesturing toward the contracts on the table. "You came," he observed, a quiet probe of her resolve. Her response, "I have questions," was the first gentle volley fired back into his meticulously ordered universe. What followed was less a negotiation and more a demonstration of absolute control. Elena, referring to her notes, attempted to begin with Clause 7, but Adrienne dismissed the idea. Over the next hour, she witnessed him systematically deconstruct the agreement. The man was ruthlessly transparent, addressing every single point and even conferencing in his lawyer to clarify the legal terminology. It was a masterfully orchestrated performance, crafted to simulate a sense of collaboration and trust. His offer to cover her own legal fees was a brilliant finishing touch, solidifying the illusion. By the time he was done, she had 12 pages of notes and her mind was reeling. Her final question, aimed directly at his true motivations, completely shattered their temporary truce. In response, Adrian wove a narrative of deliberate self-imposed isolation. He described his life as a fortress engineered for maximum efficiency, an admission that he existed like a dispassionate machine. He then positioned her as an anomaly in his flawless system, someone who wasn't playing an angle. He asserted that her raw candor was a refreshing change. It was a classic narcissistic tactic, recasting his emotional detachment not as a deficiency, but as a challenge she was uniquely suited to address. Elena identified it simply: loneliness. He conceded the point, then immediately reasserted his power. Lonely with means is preferable. He returned to the contract, terming it a business proposition. Her exit strategy from a life he had accurately surmised was stifling her. He revealed he had observed the entire dynamic at a family dinner, diagnosing her as drowning and presenting his contract as a life raft. The conditions, however, were staggering. 12 months of mutual exploitation followed by an impeccably clean break. Elena's thoughts spiraled, envisioning the consequences: total alienation from her family, the public humiliation. Adrienne made no attempt to soften the blow. He confirmed it. It will be unpleasant and difficult, he acknowledged, framing it as the necessary cost of her liberation. This is how it begins: the jailer offering a perilous flight from a more soul-crushing prison. Confronted with a slow erasure of self, she opted for the devil she had yet to know. I require one amendment, the contract. Her voice was steady. He countered instantly. Which one? Clause 17, the section concerning termination. It must state that if either party develops genuine romantic feelings, the agreement is immediately void, without financial repercussions, and bypassing the 6-month waiting period. For a fleeting moment, something akin to surprise registered on Adrienne's face. You consider that a plausible risk? I consider it prudent to account for all possibilities. Elena met his gaze, her posture unyielding. This arrangement is only viable if we both remain clear about its nature. The moment that shifts, it is terminated. Understood? He considered this for a long moment before delivering a crisp, decisive nod. Understood. I will instruct my lawyer to add the clause. Then I need 24 hours for my own attorney to review the final draft. Elena rose to her feet, feeling a sudden urge to move, as if testing the boundaries of her newfound agency. If the terms are acceptable, I will sign. If not, this conversation never happened. She collected her bag, her hands perfectly still, and so the hourglass was turned. By Friday, Adrienne stated, rising to his feet as he extended a hand, the conversation clearly over. Friday, she echoed. Elena accepted his hand, feeling a grip that was confident but not confining. In that brief contact, they were two souls on the edge of a precipice, staring into a future that defied all logic, yet felt like fate. As she turned to go, she paused. May I ask one more thing? He nodded. Why didn't you just be honest with Victoria from the beginning? A faint, cold smile curled on his lips. Because her question was never about my wants. It was about my utility to her. There's a world of difference. Elena stepped into the jarring daylight, her phone vibrating with her mother's frantic messages. The city screamed around her, a chaotic symphony of lives she didn't know. A wave of both dread and exhilarating freedom washed over her. By Friday, she had to choose, suffocate in the life she knew, or take a blind leap with a man who could teach her how to fight. Elena moved without direction, her only desire to feel the world shifting beneath her feet. In the space between his office and the unknown, she realized the decision was already a ghost in the room. It had been made the moment she'd first packed a bag. The attorney, Martha Castellano, was a predator at $300 an hour. She wore her gray hair in a bun pulled so tight it looked like a weapon, with reading glasses on a silver chain and a gaze that had witnessed the full spectrum of human folly. This is either the most strategic move of your life or the most spectacular act of self-destruction, Martha announced, having dissected the contract for 2 hours. Frankly, I can't decide which. Elena sat opposite her, the office air thick with the scent of old paper and bitter coffee. Not exactly reassuring. It's not meant to be. You're entering a contractual marriage to a man you don't know. A union with a built-in end date. Comfort shouldn't even be part of the equation. Martha tapped a flagged section. That being said, the document is surprisingly sound. Whoever drafted it tried to build a fortress for you both, which is an anomaly. These things are usually cages. So, you believe I should sign? I believe you need to know what chains you're putting on. Martha slid a legal pad, dense with her scrawled insights, across the desk. The compensation is significant, but it's fair. The exit strategies offer you numerous paths out if the arrangement sours. The confidentiality agreements shield you as much as they shield him. But this, Elena, remains an enormous risk. You are legally binding yourself to a man infamous for being a corporate titan. If he chooses to violate this, you have recourse. But a lawsuit cannot heal a broken mind. For 3 days, the single choice had held Elena captive. 3 days of ignoring her family's desperate calls while hiding on her friend Maya's couch, attempting to see a future that wasn't a catastrophe. What would you do in my position? A faint, knowing smile touched Martha's lips. I would measure what I am fleeing from against what I am running toward. If the past you're escaping is worse than the gamble ahead, you are making an error. But if you are moving to something better than what you leave behind, then perhaps the gamble is justified. And that's quite philosophical for an attorney. I am a woman of many layers. Martha pushed the contract over the polished wood. From a professional standpoint, this is a solid agreement, with terms more favorable than you could have hoped for. On a personal note, I see more fire in your eyes discussing this insane proposition than I have in a very long time. Interpret that as you will. In the quiet of Martha's office that afternoon, Elena signed. Her name appeared foreign and small on the signature line. With Martha serving as witness, they duplicated the documents and had everything notarized. The entire process, a mere 20 minutes, fundamentally shattered and rebuilt her world. One final piece of advice, Martha said as Elena prepared to depart. The clause that voids this deal upon romance. It's a work of genius, but tread carefully. The line between performance and reality has a tendency to vanish. Don't deceive yourself about what this truly is. Now that caution settled like a cold stone in Elena's stomach on the drive back to Maya's apartment. Her phone was an altar of ignored pleas. 17 missed calls from her mother, 9 from Victoria, and a single, vaguely menacing one from her dad. She dismissed them all, sending one concise text to Adrian. "The agreement is signed. What is the next step?" The response was immediate. "We formalize it tomorrow, 10 a.m. at City Hall. Bring identification and the contract. I will manage everything else." Elena stared at the message. Tomorrow. In less than 24 hours, she would be wedded to a man she had met only twice. The sheer absurdity should have made her bolt. Instead, a feeling dangerously close to relief washed over her. Maya discovered her at the apartment's small balcony, observing the flow of traffic below. "You look like you're about to either throw up or jump. I'd rather you did neither." "I signed it." Elena held up her phone. "It's happening tomorrow." God. Maya collapsed into the adjacent plastic chair, which protested loudly. "Okay, wow. So this is happening. Do you have something to wear? You can't get married in denim." "It's a technicality." "This is not a genuine wedding. It is genuine enough to bind you legally. You will wear something respectable." Maya had already shifted into operational command, seizing control of the situation. "Get up. We're going shopping." "Maya, I can't afford." "My treat. Think of it as a wedding present for making the gutsiest decision of your life." She pulled Elena to her feet. "And one more thing. If you are seeing this through, you are doing it properly. You will enter that courthouse looking like you command the room, not like you're walking to your own execution." At a small boutique, they discovered a simple cream dress that looked elegant and deliberate. When the sales assistant inquired about the occasion, Maya's confident reply of, "A courthouse ceremony," earned them an offer of champagne, which both declined. Later, back at the apartment, Elena studied her reflection. She looked like an actress portraying a role in a life that wasn't her own. Or perhaps for the very first time, she looked like someone finally taking ownership of her own story. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" Maya asked, her presence filling the doorway. "You know you can still back out. You could stay here, find a job, create a new life from scratch. Marrying a total stranger is not your only option." "I'm not just escaping them. I am buying myself time to discover who I am without their influence." Elena turned away from the mirror. 12 months. That is the agreement. A year to simply exist with enough capital at the end to start completely over. And if this entire arrangement implodes, at least I attempted something instead of slowly withering away in that house. Elena fell onto the bed, a wave of exhaustion hitting her. "I am so tired of being invisible, Maya. Tired of being the daughter they never wanted, the sister they overlooked. This is madness, but it is my madness. I am choosing it. Surely that has to mean something." "Aw." Maya sat beside her, their shoulders touching, a familiar comfort from their college years when Elena was the quiet soul and Maya was the force of nature who had essentially insisted they become friends. The contract was sealed, its clauses a shield for both parties. A warning was logged about the target, Adrian, and the psychological distortion field created by his level of influence. Subject Elena then entered a sleepless night, her mind a theater for every conceivable way this arrangement could catastrophically fail. By morning, she had cataloged over 30 disaster scenarios, but felt no trace of regret. At 900 hours, she armed herself in the cream dress, applying a mask of makeup for composure. The final presentation was a sharp edge between icy control and raw, exposed nerves. At 9:30, a text from Adrian served as her activation signal. After a strained embrace with her friend, Elena descended to a waiting vehicle, a blacked-out luxury sedan. A driver admitted her to the rear cabin, a space furnished with materials worth more than her entire existence. The journey to the municipal building was a swift 15 minutes. Behind the car's tinted windows, the city was an abstract blur, a fitting visual for Elena's mind trying to compute her legal merger with Adrian Volkov. He was already waiting, a statue on the courthouse steps, his presence amplified by a dark, impeccable suit. For one fraction of a second, his stoic facade fractured. An indecipherable emotion flickered in his eyes as she stepped out. He offered a generic compliment on her dress, the words feeling utterly rehearsed. Elena responded with a manufactured pleasantry, standing beside him and clutching her purse like a lifeline. When she confessed her terror, he reframed her fear as a mark of clarity before guiding her inside. He detailed the 10-minute process, oaths, signatures, filing, reinforcing that this was purely a business transaction. He strode into the building, leaving her with no option but to follow. The officiant, a woman in her 50s, moved with a practiced weariness, her voice devoid of warmth after overseeing 1,000 such transactions. Once their identities were confirmed, she guided them into a small, sterile room that hummed under the glare of fluorescent tubes. She inquired about rings with an air that suggested she already knew the answer. Adrian confirmed their absence. The clerk presented a card with scripted vows, noting the process would take 5 minutes and they could add personal words. A suggestion they declined with a single silent glance. Instructed to face one another, they stood as the clerk recited the legal text in a flat monotone. Elena felt herself drifting away, the words dissolving into a meaningless buzz as her soul fixated on the stark reality of the room and the immense, irreversible bargain she was making with the stranger. "Do you, Adrian Volkov, take this woman as your lawfully wedded wife?" the clerk intoned. His reply, "I do," fell with the stark, cold finality of a business contract being sealed. Every gaze then shifted to her. "Do you, Elena Whitmore, take this man as your lawfully wedded husband?" This was the precipice, the final moment to retreat. A silent scream of panic rose within her, yet the words, "I do," escaped her lips, carrying her over a threshold from which there was no return. A document materialized. They both signed. His script was a sharp, confident stroke. Hers a trembling, fragile mark. With the clerk's own signature, the pact was complete. "Congratulations, you are legally married," she announced, already motioning them toward the exit for the next couple. They stepped into the light without a word, the certificate in Elena's hand feeling not like a promise, but a sentence. And in an instant, she was bound to Adrian Volkov, the entire impossible pact concluded in less time than it takes to run an errand. On the courthouse steps, Adrian's corporate persona reasserted itself with brutal efficiency. A car would deliver her to his residence. An assistant awaited her there. He himself had a meeting at 1200 hours and could not attend. But they would convene that evening to discuss the arrangements. Elena's whisper was barely audible. "You're leaving?" He merely reiterated his itinerary before consigning her to his security, Marcus. His phone was already in hand, his focus shifted back to his empire. He assured her the staff was available, then turned to his own vehicle, leaving her holding the marriage license, a newly acquired asset in his meticulously ordered world. His name, a fragile sound from her lips, was just enough to make him pause. He froze, his hand on the door of the car. "This is wrong," she uttered. The ghost of a smirk touched his lips. "We entered into a flawed agreement. I will see you tonight." And with that, he was gone, his car consumed by the river of city traffic. Elena remained with Marcus, a silent mountain of a man holding her car door open. "Mrs. Volkov," he rumbled. The name felt alien, a label affixed to her very soul. 24 years as Elena Whitmore, nullified in 5 short minutes. The 40-minute journey carried them from the city's heart to a secluded enclave of staggering wealth. They passed through iron gates to a monolithic home of glass and dark stone, a monument to cold, unyielding power. Marcus offered his only observation of the day. Mr. Volkov designed it himself. Elena arrived at a residence pulled from the pages of an architectural digest. All clean lines and opulent materials that made her family's ancestral home seem a pale imitation. This estate did not suggest wealth, it proclaimed dominance. As Marcus navigated the drive, a woman in her 60s with an imperious air stood waiting. "Mrs. Volkov," she stated, her voice crisp. "I am Sarah Chen, the household manager. Welcome." Her heels clicked against the polished floors like a metronome, marking time as she led Elena inside. The interior was vast and minimalist, with soaring ceilings and art that seemed to pass judgment. Sarah began the tour: the kitchen, the dining room, the library, and then Adrian's office. A space, she was informed, was an absolute sanctum which she was forbidden to enter. Sarah detailed the layout of the second floor. Elena's suite occupied the east wing, while Adrian's was in the west, 2 sovereign territories joined by a single roof. A gym and a pool were also mentioned matter-of-factly. Ascending a dramatic floating staircase, Sarah unlocked the door to Elena's gilded cage. The room was immense, easily 3 times the size of her former bedroom, with a wall of glass and starkly elegant furniture. The bathroom was a sanctuary of marble and chrome, while the walk-in closet surpassed the square footage of many city apartments. Sarah noted that while Elena's belongings were in transit, Mr. Volkov had seen to her immediate needs. The closet was stocked with an initial wardrobe in her size. Toiletries were arranged in precise rows. "Should you require anything further," Sarah said, "it will be provided." Gazing at the manicured perfection of the grounds, Elena exhaled. "This is overwhelming." "I imagine it is." Sarah's tone was perfectly neutral, devoid of sympathy or malice. "Mr. Volkov has briefed me on the nature of your arrangement. I have been in his employ for 8 years. He is demanding, but he is equitable. Adhere to the rules. Do not interfere in his affairs, and your time here will be without incident." "And what are the rules?" "You are not to enter his office. You will not discuss his work with anyone. You will not arrange social functions. Your private quarters are your own. The common areas are to be kept orderly. Dinner is at 7 when he is in residence, but your presence is required only at formal functions. The staff consists of myself, Marcus, a chef, a housekeeper, and a gardener. We are employed by Mr. Volkov. Do you have any questions?" Elena had a million, but none this automaton could answer. "When will I meet them?" "As the need arises. We are here to provide service, not companionship." And with that, Sarah departed. "Make yourself comfortable. The intercom is by the door should you require assistance. Dinner is at 7, with Mr. Volkov or in your room." After Sarah left, the silence of the cavernous room was an oppressive weight. Then her phone screen came to life. displaying 17 messages from her family, their frantic words crashing over her. The final message was a command from her father to return home immediately, his tone that of a man addressing a disobedient child. With a cold resolve, she sent a single text to her mother. "I am not coming back. I am married. Do not contact me again." Then she powered the device off. The hours that followed were a vast, silent emptiness. Elena began to unpack the few boxes that held her former life, feeling like a ghost haunting a palace. The closet contained a curated selection of clothing in her size, understated, expensive pieces. In the bathroom, she discovered her preferred brand of toiletries, a detail so intimate it felt both deeply considerate and unnervingly invasive. At 6:30, she stood before the closet, contemplating what one wears to dinner with a husband who is a stranger. Every option felt wrong. She chose dark jeans and a cashmere sweater, an armor of normalcy, and descended the stairs feeling like a trespasser. Adrienne was in the kitchen speaking with the chef, his tie gone, sleeves rolled. The sight of him so relaxed was somehow more unsettling. "You found the room," he observed, a statement of fact, not a question. "Sarah is exceedingly efficient." Elena lingered in the doorway, uncertain of her place. He gestured to the dining table, set for two. "Don't hover, sit." He explained that the chef, Thomas, had worked for him for 5 years and was devoted to his craft, implying she should express appreciation for the meal. Thomas offered a brief nod and then disappeared. Elena took her seat, watching as Adrian served her plate before his own, a strange pantomime of marital convention that coiled her stomach into knots. "Tell me about your afternoon," Adrian began, dissecting his fish with surgical precision. "It was strange, disorienting. I turned off my phone. My family was becoming complicated." She merely moved the food on her plate. "And your meeting? Productive?" He consumed his meal with a terrifying focus as if it were merely fuel. "Your family's opposition to this arrangement will intensify. They will likely appear here, or they will find other means to pressure you. Your response is your own decision. I will not intervene unless you request it." Their reaction to my breaking things off with Victoria was already a storm. This is the hurricane. Adrian set down his fork, his gaze direct. "You must understand this, Elena. Your family will employ every tactic: guilt, obligation, finances, public humiliation. They will claim I am controlling you, that you are destroying your future. Some of their accusations may even hold a kernel of truth, but you signed the contract. That gives you power. Do not allow them to make you forget that." Elena managed to swallow a piece of salmon, tasting none of its quality. "Why are you offering support? You could simply order me to handle it." "I could, but we must coexist for the next 12 months. Your sustained misery would be inefficient." Then he resumed eating. And there it was, the operational framework for a corporate merger, not a marriage. Her attempt to speak of family, of human connection, was met with a contractual firewall. One could almost see the relevant clause and their agreement reflected in his eyes. The temperature in the room plummeted, and Elena retreated. She murmured an apology, but the fleeting possibility of a connection had vanished. Adrian pivoted instantly to business, their first public appearance. A black-tie charity gala, framed not as an evening out, but as a mandatory professional engagement. His words were clinical, stipulating that her attendance and a convincing display of happiness were required. "Can you manage that?" Was not an inquiry into her emotional state, but an assessment of her ability to perform. Her reply, "I can perform happiness," was an acknowledgement of the mission. He nodded, then added that an assistant would brief her on attire and key attendees. The event was a necessary evil, the duty where even boredom was not an acceptable option. Elena's dry response confirmed she understood her role. She would not be a liability. A shadow crosses Adrian's face at her phrasing, a silent rebuke of her vocabulary. He dismisses the word purchased, substituting it with deal, a careful edit to maintain his own clean narrative. But Elena holds her ground, underscoring the raw truth. She is an asset he acquired for a purpose. The quiet sound of his silverware touching the plate is a final, unspoken verdict. His assurance that she'll be valuable is both a prediction and a command, and he warns her against imagining offenses. A flush of heat rises in her cheeks. She has lost this exchange. Her confession that this is all overwhelming earns a brief moment of softened reason from him. This was always the arrangement, he states, framing the chaos as a foreseeable complication. The remainder of dinner is a sterile conversation between strangers, learning the boundaries of a shared space as defined by contract. The call to Maya is a debriefing, an agent checking in from deep cover, confirming she's operational, but quietly questioning if she truly needs her exit plan. Her initial impression of the estate is one of sheer insanity. The house is obscene, the staff unnervingly robotic. Dinner was an exercise in profound, awkward silence, a complete vacuum of warmth with the man she was now bound to. Elena captures her new existence perfectly. It is an abnormal situation. Her strategy is pure survival, focused on an upcoming gala that serves as her first major performance review, where she must embody the blissful wife. Her friend Maya's counsel is to simply channel Victoria, to wear a mask to endure the ordeal. A laugh escapes Elena, hollow and devoid of humor, as the sheer madness of it all crashes down. She craves normalcy, but Maya dismisses the notion. Normal had left her stranded. This new, insane path is a calculated move. The daily check-ins underscore the immense stakes of the operation. For now, Elena stands alone, feeling diminished, anxious, and utterly adrift. Waking to the morning sun serves as a harsh confirmation of her new, inescapable reality. She is married, a resident in Adrian Volkov's universe. Her former life feels as if it's been surgically excised. Her phone offers a portal to that ghost life, glowing with 43 missed calls and 62 unread texts. The messages from her family shift from concern to pure fury, but it is the 3 texts from Victoria that land like physical blows. The first accuses her of betrayal. The second brands her a cheap replacement for the world to see. The third is the final crushing punch, blaming Elena's jealousy for shattering their family. Her response is to delete and block, a swift, clean amputation. She lacks the strength to face Victoria's fire. A knock at the door pulls her back to the present. It is Sarah, holding a breakfast tray, delivering the first taste of her meticulously managed new life. A brief update from the staff informs her that Mr. Volkov is unavailable until the evening, but his assistant, Claire, will contact her at 10. Elena makes a single request: a car, a vehicle to escape her gilded prison. Tucked away in an anonymous cafe, she begins a meticulous deep dive on Adrian. His business empire is a far more intricate network than she had realized, with interests spanning property, technology, and finance. His public persona is that of a brilliant and ruthless operator, a man who sits on 3 corporate boards while managing 2 charities. The photographs reveal a consistent pattern with women. They are beautiful, ornamental, and always temporary. The crucial detail is that no woman is ever pictured with him twice, painting a portrait of a man with no discernible emotional ties. The information confirms a man who methodically avoids genuine human connection, a truth that aligns perfectly with his transactional worldview and settles in her stomach like a stone. Claire's call arrives with military precision at 1000 hours, her voice crisp and strictly professional. As Adrian's assistant, her duty is to prepare Elena for public appearances, beginning with the gala. She details the entire protocol: fittings, appointments, and dossiers on the other attendees. These files are not for small talk. They are tactical briefings for navigating the social battlefield. The entire process is presented as perfectly routine. A stylist is scheduled for 2 the following day. Adrian's preference is irrelevant so long as the final appearance is appropriate. The precision is chilling. "It is my job," Claire states, her tone like ice. The files are en route. When asked if she has questions, Elena remains silent. "Excellent," Claire concludes. The call concludes, leaving Elena feeling like little more than an asset on a corporate balance sheet. Adrian's world is a flawless machine where every surface gleams and each action is optimized for efficiency. Rather than feeling protected, the environment makes her feel as if she is being systematically erased, reduced to an anonymous component in a vast, indifferent apparatus. The afternoon becomes a blur as she wanders the city, a phantom moving through its arteries. It is a small, desperate bid for freedom, a few hours where no one is observing her, demanding something from her. She is simply another face in the crowd. Upon her return near 5 in the evening, a box awaits her. Inside lies a plastic card bearing her new name and a handwritten note. "For whatever you need, no limit, no questions." She can only stare at the card. No limit. It is access to a level of power she never knew could exist. That kind of power feels unclean. She places the card in her wallet, deliberately pushing away thoughts of the man who could offer such a thing so casually. Dinner is another exercise in profound quiet. A shared exhaustion has settled over them, creating a strange sort of truce that lowers their defenses. They exchange hollow pleasantries over pasta. "How was your first day as Mrs. Volkoff?" he asks, pouring a wine she hesitantly accepts. "Surreal," she admits, describing how she felt like a criminal simply buying a coffee with his card. The wine alone likely cost more than her former weekly budget. She mentions Claire's intimidating efficiency. He concedes the point, admitting his assistant is the only thing preventing his life from descending into chaos. For a brief instant, the corporate facade cracks and he appears almost relaxed. "Your role at the gala is simple," he informs her. "Stay near me, smile at the appropriate times, and allow me to handle the politics." Her sole function is to project contentment. He clarifies he isn't expecting a performance, just that she not appear miserable. He studies her for a moment, then asks if that is too much to ask. She assures him she can manage it and sets down her glass. "May I ask a question?" His reply depends on what it is, he says. "Why do you have no friends?" she asks, explaining her research revealed only business associates and allies, never anyone who seemed truly close. Adrian is quiet for so long she assumes he will not answer. At last he speaks. "Friendship requires trust," he says, "and trust is a liability I cannot afford." The desolation in that statement is staggering. It is, he concedes, but loneliness is a controllable variable. People are not. He begins clearing the table, a task meant for staff, explaining a lesson learned long ago. Caring for others gives them the power to destroy you. It is simply more efficient not to care. Is that what you believe this is? She asked, gesturing at the cold emptiness between them. His reply, "Isn't it?" silenced her completely. They cleared the rest of the table without a word, moving in tandem like automatons performing a hollow ritual. Afterward, Adrian disappeared into his office, and Elena retreated to her room. Lying in the darkness, she contemplated trust and loneliness, and the stark contradiction of building a life with someone held at such a distance. She had agreed to exactly 12 months of this, controlled, clinical, with zero emotional exposure, but an old warning echoed in her mind. The line between who you pretend to be and who you are can simply fade away. She fell asleep, wondering which side of that line she occupied, and if she would recognize when it was gone. The stylist, Simone, arrived at 2 o'clock sharp, trailing a rack of garment bags. Her effortless elegance made Elena feel like a complete imposter. "Claire sent your sizes and the event brief," Simone announced, arranging dresses with a surgeon's precision. A black-tie charity gala. The objective demanded a delicate performance, to be present yet unseen. After 7 failed ensembles, Adrienne's handler, Simone, produced an emerald silk gown that seemed almost preordained. It clung to her frame with an unnerving precision, a silent testament to how thoroughly they knew her measurements. Simone praised its elegance, its camera readiness, and how it would please the man in charge. Elena, watching her own reflection, thought, when did he develop an interest in couture? But this wasn't about aesthetics. It was a statement of ownership. With a pair of emerald earrings, Simone added just enough sparkle to complement, not overshadow, the dress. The mission was painfully clear: become the beautiful, silent ornament on Adrian's arm, a role that felt like a slow, suffocating poison. This was the very skill she had spent a lifetime honing, now offered up for purchase. As Simone departed with the rejected gowns and a promise of footwear, Elena opened a file from Claire. It was a 43-page intelligence brief on every guest attending the gala, profiles, affiliations with Adrian's network, and a catalog of conversational traps. The dossier was pure espionage, which was precisely the intention. While she was absorbing the details on a developer named Marcus Chen, Adrian appeared. He inquired if Simone's task had been successful. "Yes," Elena replied. "She mentioned you'd find it acceptable." A statement layered with unspoken meaning. Closing her laptop, she asked if such exhaustive dossiers were standard for his gatherings, only for the events, he noted, where the conversations were valued in the millions. For a moment, looking worn, he seemed almost human. He asked if she had studied the file on Senator Morrison, the man obstructing his latest venture. She had. She relayed the crucial intel. His wife, Carolyn Morrison, was the true power in their partnership, with a deep passion for landscape architecture. A flicker of strategic insight ignited in Adrian's eyes. He outlined the new mission: build a rapport with Carolyn, discuss urban green spaces, and perhaps subtly dismantle her resistance to his project. Elena understood immediately. He wanted her to weaponize her own genuine passion to manipulate a senator's wife. He framed it as a simple, heartfelt conversation about something she cherished, where any strategic gain would be a mere coincidence. The logic was flawless and cold. Feigning nonchalance, he assured her there was no pressure, yet insisted she was uniquely suited for this. Not as a woman, he clarified, but because her passion was authentic, capable of bypassing the defenses Caroline had against men with transparent motives. He left the decision with her, a gesture of freedom that was more coercive than any command. He was asking her to turn her sincerity into a blade, a perversion far more intimate than a simple lie. Yet by offering her an escape route, he had shown her an unexpected flicker of respect. She returned to the dossier, focusing her attention on Caroline Morrison. The file revealed a woman with a master's degree in environmental policy who had single-handedly torpedoed two similar developments. She was no one's fool. This illuminated Adrian's strategy. He was either testing Elena's mettle or gambling that a single authentic moment could achieve what his immense power could not. Both possibilities left a cold dread in Elena's stomach. The following 3 days were a study in strained avoidance. Adrian left before dawn and returned after dark, their dinners filled with a sterile, safe conversation that demanded nothing from either of them. Their initial days in proximity had been frigid and transactional. Every interaction was clipped, purely functional, devoid of any real human connection. Despite this, Elena found herself subconsciously charting his movements, the professional armor she wore beginning to dissolve into a strange new existence, just as her friend Martha had foreseen. With the Friday gala approaching like an unstoppable force, she knew she needed to phone her friend Maya and borrow a measure of her strength. Elena confessed everything, admitting she felt completely submerged in a world she couldn't navigate. Her friend's response was blunt. Remind yourself you are legally bound to Adrian Volkov, which places you on equal footing with every other wife in that room. The advice was clumsy, yet its core message resonated. She must project an aura of absolute, unshakable confidence. At 4 o'clock, a team of stylists arrived, operating with surgical precision. Using the guest list as a schematic, they sculpted her appearance to meet the mission's parameters. Elena 2.0. By 6, she was a masterpiece. At 6:30, Adrian entered, clad in a tuxedo, and simply stopped, an unreadable emotion clouding his features. "You look fine," he murmured, a profound understatement. She credited Simone's team, took her clutch, and asked if he was prepared for the performance. He confirmed, offering an arm with practiced ease. The directive was disarmingly simple: merely exist. Make no effort to charm, just be present and conceal any hint of an impending breakdown. All other forms of theatrics were forbidden. The event was held at a historic mansion leased to project an aura of inherited wealth. The driveway was clogged with luxury vehicles before a gauntlet of photographers. Adrian's hand on the small of her back felt less like guidance and more like a brand of possession. "Smile," he whispered as the cameras flashed relentlessly. "This is the simple part." The interior was a perfect cliché. Glittering chandeliers, a string quartet, and servers bearing endless trays of champagne. The attendees were draped in couture and jewels, each playing a role in the grand, hollow spectacle. A woman in her 50s, Catherine, greeted Adrian with air kisses before her eyes settled on Elena, immediately identifying her as the whispered about new bride. Adrian made the introduction with quiet gravity, presenting the foundation's director, Catherine Hayes, before revealing the night's central secret. Elena Vulov was his wife. Elena offered a polite smile, while Catherine's gaze, a mixture of warmth and sharp assessment, lingered on her. The director feigned shock. "I never imagined you settling down," she remarked, labeling him the most incorrigible bachelor she knew. Elena, with practiced calm, delivered her line from the script, noting that the right person changes everything. Catherine's eyes moved between them, trying to solve the puzzle. She welcomed Elena to the circus. Adrian then leaned in, his cologne an intoxicating wave, and murmured that Catherine's acceptance was currency in this world. Elena countered that it had felt more like an interrogation. He dismissed it with a shrug, saying that was simply Catherine's way. He procured 2 glasses of champagne, handed one to her, and gestured toward their next objective. Senator Morrison and his wife, Caroline, he told her to prepare for contact. Elena emptied the glass of champagne, a desperate attempt to quiet the frantic beating of her heart. 3 days spent absorbing those dossiers had felt like studying for an examination where failure was not an option. An entire hour bled away in a series of hollow introductions and meaningless exchanges. Adriana navigated the room like a hunter, his charisma just another weapon in his arsenal. Elena simply performed her function as the beautiful accessory, smiling on cue, feeling utterly invisible. Then his hand was on her back again, a firm pressure guiding her toward the Morrisons. Adrian's voice shifted into a warm, convivial tone as he greeted the senator and his wife, introducing Elena once more. The senator, a man forged in the crucible of politics, gave her a look of pure, strategic evaluation. His wife, Caroline, however, was entirely different. She possessed a quiet force, an awareness that seemed to miss nothing. "Congratulations on your marriage," she stated, her tone devoid of warmth. "It was all very sudden, wasn't it?" Elena remained perfectly composed. "When it's right, there's no reason to wait." Caroline's smile was a thin, brittle thing. "How very spontaneous," she observed, then added, "Adrian never struck me as the impulsive type." Adrian interjected with practiced smoothness, suggesting that everyone holds secrets. He then pivoted, noting Caroline's work in urban conservation, feigning a shared passion. The tactic was so transparent it was almost comical, yet it landed. Caroline's expression softened from guarded suspicion to genuine interest. "You're involved in conservation?" she inquired. "Sustainable urban landscapes," Elena clarified. "It's my field of architectural focus." The relief of speaking a simple truth was profound. Caroline conceded that this subject was a welcome reprieve from the evening's artificial pleasantries. For the first time, a genuine laugh escaped her, transforming her guarded expression. An unspoken understanding formed between them. A shared disdain for the charade of the party. She began discussing the intricacies of the Bryant Park restoration, soliciting Elena's opinion on native plantings. A real dialogue was unfolding, completely subverting Adrian's calculated plan. As Caroline spoke with rising passion about biodiversity and municipal funding, the knot of anxiety in Elena's chest began to loosen. Adrian and the senator became indistinct figures as the 2 women stood by a window overlooking the gardens. Then, with clinical precision, Caroline delivered the blow. "Your husband is using you to influence me regarding his financial district project." A wave of hot shame washed over Elena's face. "Yes," Elena admitted softly, "that would be his strategy. Everything he does is a calculated maneuver." Caroline's stare was sharp and discerning. "And yet, you're here, engaging in a real conversation instead of advancing his agenda. That is a curious decision." Elena replied simply, "Manipulation is exhausting. It's less effort to be a person." Caroline raised her glass. "For what it's worth, the project itself isn't without merit, but he needs to resolve the environmental impact reports." His aggressive approach makes me inclined to deny it on principle. Have you shared this with him?" Elena shook her head. "He is not a man who listens." A weary expression crossed Caroline's face. Men like him hear no as an invitation to push harder. Perhaps you need to communicate in a language he understands. Be direct. After Caroline departed, Elena stood alone, wondering if she had just been handed a new weapon, or if she had merely passed an impossibly complex test. She reasoned it was likely an amalgam of the two. Just then, a man materialized at her side. "You have a certain gift for this," he murmured. Elena faced a man in his 30s, his wealth apparent in everything from his designer glasses to his knowing smile. "Apologies, David Reeves. I handle some tech consulting for Adriana." She offered her name, Elena Volkov, a title that still felt utterly foreign on her tongue. "Oh, I'm well aware of who you are. This entire party is the enigmatic wife who appeared from thin air." His tone aimed for camaraderie, but his eyes were performing a cold, data-driven analysis. "I must confess, my curiosity is piqued. Adrienne has been unattached for an eternity." Elena recited the fabricated tale they had practiced, a story of meeting at a charity ball, of a shared love for public parks, praying he would find it plausible. "Parks," David echoed with a soft chuckle. "The most mundane origin story imaginable, which, ironically, lends it a certain credibility." He laughed, but then his voice sharpened. "And yet the timing, it's remarkably opportune, occurring just as the whole Victoria Whitmore affair collapsed." A shard of ice seemed to pierce Elena's core. "I have no comprehension of what you're referring to." David's smile never faltered. "I'm merely suggesting it's a fortunate turn of events for him. Adrienne concludes one engagement and in the next breath marries the sister. It certainly fuels conversation." The words were delivered with effortless grace, yet they were an unmistakable threat. "Not that I'm implying any impropriety occurred. Only that in this world, perception is the only reality that matters." Elena erected a formidable emotional wall. "Then let them converse. My relationship with Adrienne is entirely separate from my sister." David's grin deepened. "Of course, I'm certain it's all perfectly legitimate. In any case, it was a pleasure, Elena. I'm sure our paths will cross again." He drifted away, leaving Elena clutching her glass with a force that threatened to shatter it. The message had been delivered with chilling clarity. "You are under surveillance." A moment later, Adrian was beside her, his perception so keen he instantly saw she was disturbed. "What did that man say to you?" "David Reeves. He was impeccably polite while suggesting our marriage was little more than a corporate merger." Elena set her glass down before her grip could destroy it. "Is this the standard mode of operation here, or am I receiving some special treatment as the new bride?" Adrian's jaw hardened. "This is their procedure. They wage their wars with polished insults and by probing for vulnerabilities, all while maintaining a veneer of innocence." A chilling resolve entered his gaze. What precisely were his words? Elena recounted everything, watching his expression transform into a mask of pure, frigid rage, a stark reminder of the danger this man possessed. "I will deal with David," he stated, his voice a low, menacing promise. "Don't," she countered, the sharpness of her own voice surprising her. "That will only escalate the situation. It will paint me as someone who requires you to fight her battles." She met his gaze. "I can manage rumors. I was raised alongside Victoria. I am fluent in this pathetic game." Adrian simply observed her for a long, quiet moment, and a subtle shift occurred in his expression. Very well, as you wish. But if this conversation evolves into genuine harassment, you are to inform me without delay. For the following hour, she maintained the facade, navigating a sea of unfamiliar faces that left her mind reeling. The smile remained fixed, a fragile shield against 100 scrutinizing gazes. By the time she departed, she was utterly depleted, though not in any physical sense. In the vehicle, Adrian was a dark shape against the glowing cityscape. "You were an asset tonight," he finally observed. "More than an asset, in fact. You elicited a genuine smile from Carolyn Morrison. I've been attempting that for 3 months." Elena answered. "She considers you a tyrant. She suggested that directness would be more effective than your attempts to intimidate her." Adrian turned, fully facing her. "She confided that in you?" "She did, and she also mentioned your project holds promise, provided you address the environmental concerns." Elena rested her head back, lost in thought. She was evaluating me to see if I would relay the intelligence or hoard it for myself. "So why are you disclosing this to me?" "Because the emotional toll of this masquerade is too severe, and I am not designed for these strategic maneuvers." Elena simply shut her eyes. "Besides, her assessment is likely accurate. Your methods are notably aggressive." She prepared for a defensive retort, but he instead released a genuine laugh, a sound entirely different from his hollow corporate chuckle. "That may be the most candid feedback I've received in years. My entire staff does nothing but offer carefully constructed falsehoods. Would you prefer I begin doing the same?" "No." The word escaped her, swift and resolute. "No, I would not." They completed the journey in a shared silence that felt like a profound victory. Inside, Elena shed the tortuous heels Simone had chosen, losing 3 inches of height, but reclaiming a small part of her soul. "I appreciate your assistance," Adrian said in the foyer. "Your actions tonight." "It was a condition of our agreement." Elena began to climb the stairs, then paused. "Adrian, what David mentioned about perception and timing, will that become a significant issue?" "People will invariably gossip. Their words are meaningless so long as we remain grounded in our own reality." He loosened his tie, appearing every bit as weary as she felt. "Get some rest. We can review the events in the morning if you wish." Elena retreated to her chamber, divesting herself of the emerald gown and stowing it away like a piece of criminal evidence. She scrubbed away layers of cosmetic artifice and studied her reflection, seeking a connection between the woman who had just impersonated a high society operative and the one who had spent a lifetime striving for invisibility. She was on the verge of succumbing to sleep when her phone illuminated the darkness. It was Mia's number. "Report?" Mia's voice crackled. It was proceeding reasonably well until a man essentially accused me of being a manipulative fortune hunter who ensnared Adrian. Elena gathered the blankets around herself like a shield. But I endured. I held a coherent conversation about landscape design and only felt the urge to flee the room, screaming on 3 separate occasions. "I'm counting that as a success." Mia exhaled a long sigh of relief. "You see, you are capable of this." "I don't know if I'm capable of it for 12 months. Everyone there is perpetually performing, analyzing every word, searching for an advantage. It was utterly exhausting." "Then cease your performance. Simply be yourself and force them to contend with it." Mia yawned, the sound cavernous over the line. Forget engaging in their psychological warfare just because you are on their territory. After the call, Elena lay staring into the void, questioning where the performance concluded and her true self began. For years, she had been the family specter, unseen, compliant, entirely inconsequential, and the role had profoundly damaged her psyche. Perhaps this one-year contract was more than a business arrangement. Perhaps it was her singular chance to discover her own identity when no one else was dictating the terms. The notion was simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. She must have drifted off, because her next awareness was of sunlight searing through the window and a frantic pounding on her door. As if the world were ending, Elena bolted upright and opened it to find Sarah, her expression one of utter crisis. "Your family is present," Sarah stated flatly. "The entire contingent. They are in the driveway, insisting on seeing you, and they refuse to be denied." A cold dread solidified in Elena's stomach. "How did they locate this address?" "Irrelevant. They are here, and they are creating a disturbance." Their ultimate threat was to involve the authorities if they were denied entry. Sarah's face remained a perfect portrait of professional composure. She relayed that Adrienne was in his office but had dispatched her to ascertain Elena's wishes. Elena's hands trembled as she dressed, her thoughts a chaotic storm. She had known a confrontation was inevitable, but the timing was catastrophic. She lacked the emotional fortification to face the entire family simultaneously. She instructed Sarah to allow her 5 minutes and to inform Adrienne that she had the situation under control. After Sarah departed, Elena met her own gaze in the mirror, affixed a mask of courage, and descended the stairs. Through the beveled glass of the front door, she saw the hostile formation: her father's Mercedes, her mother's Range Rover, and Victoria's BMW, arranged like a tactical unit. Her parents stood as rigid statues of affluent fury. Nearby, Victoria paced, feigning anxiety while her attention was fixed on her phone. Elena inhaled one final, steadying breath and swung the door open. The moment they laid eyes on her, the assault began. Her mother's features contorted into a mask of unadulterated rage, while her father took a physical step to bar her way, causing Victoria to snap her phone shut. Catherine's voice was a blade. "What precisely is the meaning of this? Do you have any conception of the disaster you have unleashed upon this family?" "I married. It's a rather conventional act." Elena held her ground on the top step, leveraging the slight elevation. "I must ask you to depart. You are on private property. Property acquired with illicit funds by the very criminal to whom you are now bound." A grotesque purple hue spread across Richard's face, the veins in his neck bulging. "Whatever he offered you, whatever deceptions he spun, this concludes today. You are returning home with us, and we are having this fraudulent marriage annulled. I am 24 years old, and I made a conscious choice to marry. There are absolutely no legal grounds for an annulment." A surprising fortitude resonated in Elena's voice. "I am not returning. I desire no further communication. Please leave." "You ungrateful little—" Catherine lunged for the steps. Elena did not move. "Don't!" That single word erupted with far more venom than she meant. "My whole life has been a long study in being grateful for scraps of attention, for the smallest bedroom, for merely being tolerated in my own family. I am finished feeling indebted to you for treating me like an obligation. We gave you everything." Catherine's voice was rising to a shrill peak. A roof, an education, opportunities you never would have had. You gave me a closet for a bedroom and expected me to worship you for it. You forgot my birthday for 3 years in a row. You introduced me as the other one, as if I were a footnote. Elena felt a lifetime of buried fury begin to boil. You provided the absolute bare minimum and demanded my eternal gratitude in return. Victoria finally spoke, her voice shaking with an emotion Elena couldn't decipher. How could you marry him after what he did to me? How? He did nothing to you, Victoria. He terminated a broken engagement. And then he married you. Victoria's flawless face seemed to fracture. My own sister. You've been anticipating this moment, haven't you? Poised to claim a prize you decided was owed to you. Yet Adrian was never an object to be possessed. You coveted the facade he presents, the influence, the position, the flawless adornment. You never once tried to see the man within. An overwhelming weariness washed over Elena, the deep fatigue that settles in after a lifetime of performance. I have not seized anything that was yours. He made his own choice because with me, he saw a person, not a valuation. You are deluding yourself if you believe he harbors any genuine emotion for you, Victoria countered, her voice sharp as a scalpel. You are simply a tool for his own purposes. A man of Adrian Volkoff's stature does not wed a complete unknown without an agenda. That word struck her like a physical blow. Unknown. Elena had felt it in their condescension for years, but to hear Victoria utter it aloud was a visceral assault. Perhaps I am an unknown in your world, Yelena replied, her voice a fragile whisper. But I would prefer that to a life spent desperately seeking your validation. This is beyond reason. Richard advanced another step, his costly cologne a suffocating intrusion into her space. You will return home, Elena, immediately. We can resolve this rationally once you have moved past this immature defiance. This is not defiance. It is a departure. Elena held her position, suppressing the instinct to retreat. I owe you neither a reason nor a regret. My decision has been made. It is concluded. You have made an error you will lament for the rest of your days, Catherine seethed, her voice sinking to a coldness more terrifying than any shout. When Adrian Volkoff inevitably shatters you, because that is the nature of men like him, do not dare to come crawling back to us. I will not, Elena vowed. You have my unequivocal promise on that. The door opened at her back, and Adrian emerged onto the veranda. He made no move to touch Elena, maintaining a deliberate distance. Yet his presence alone fundamentally altered the atmosphere of the confrontation. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, he began, his impeccable courtesy laced with menace. I believe my wife has requested that you depart. I would strongly advise you to comply. You cannot isolate her from us, Richard stammered, but Adrian's piercing gaze silenced him instantly. I am not isolating her from anyone. Elena is an adult who forms her own conclusions. If she desires to see you, she is aware of your location. Her choice to avoid you is equally her prerogative. His delivery was almost nonchalant, a placid surface over a core of unyielding steel. What you will not do is appear on my land making ultimatums and veiled threats. That is not the protocol here. How could you? Catherine started, but Adrian simply spoke over her. I possess a complete recording of this entire interaction. I also retain excellent attorneys who would find the legal definitions of harassment and trespassing quite compelling. should this recur. He presented his phone. So, shall I initiate the call, or can you escort yourselves out? A sound tore from Victoria, part gasp, part shriek. I despise you both. I hope your life together is utterly wretched. She ran toward her car, slamming the door with enough force to rattle the glass before speeding from the driveway, leaving dark rubber scars on the pavement. Catherine and Richard followed, their expressions a clear promise that this conflict was far from resolved. But for that moment, they were gone. Elena remained on the porch, her eyes fixed on the receding taillights, feeling like the sole survivor on a battlefield that had erased her entire history. A tremor began in her hands, her body finally registering the aftermath now that the threat had passed. Are you all right? Aldrian's voice was a quiet presence beside her. No, but I will be. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, a profound chill seeping into her very bones. Thank you for the support. You did not require it. Yes, I did. We are a unified front, are we not? He was silent for a moment. For whatever it is worth, you managed that with more composure than I might have anticipated. Many would have crumbled under such an assault. I have had extensive practice in not crumbling. Elena turned to re-enter the house, then paused. Adrian, Victoria called me a nobody. Is that your perception of me? He regarded her for a long, unreadable moment. Nobody is what people call you when you have stripped them of their influence over you. It is not an identity, it is a weapon. The fact that it still wounds you, he noted, is proof that you have not yet severed your need for their acceptance. Is that a flaw? It is a human trait. He held the door open for her. Come inside. Thomas has prepared food, and you seem to be in dire need of caffeine. They sat in the silent kitchen, the simple ritual of eating eggs and toast steadying the trembling in Elena's hands. Adrian did not press her to speak or analyze her emotions. His solid presence from across the table provided a stronger anchor than any hollow words of comfort. They will not give up, Elena finally murmured. My family does not abandon a fight when they believe they are right. Nor do I, Adrian replied, refilling her coffee. And my resources are far deeper than theirs. If they wish to escalate this, we will face it as one. That phrase, as one, ignited something entirely foreign in Elena's chest. This was meant to be a contract, a business arrangement. But somewhere between the public pretense and the private warfare, a fundamental shift had occurred. The agreement was beginning to feel less like a temporary alliance and more like a genuine partnership. After the morning's profound upheaval, Elena felt a deep need to escape. Explaining she needed to walk and clear her mind, she insisted, I must think. You will accompany Marcus. She required protection after the earlier confrontation. Elena did not protest. She changed and had Marcus drive her to a park she had scouted. He remained by the vehicle while she walked the paths, attempting to disappear into the crowd. The space was filled with ordinary families and couples, entirely unaware of the world of turmoil she inhabited. This absolute anonymity was a strange solace, a reminder that her struggles were not the axis of the universe. Her phone vibrated. It was Maya checking in. Elena sent back a short message insisting she was fine, a complete and utter falsehood. For a full hour, she simply walked, allowing the steady rhythm to quiet the storm in her thoughts. Her adversaries had appeared. They had delivered their venom, and they had retreated. She had not broken. She had, in fact, prevailed, and in truth, that in itself felt like a monumental triumph. When she returned, Adrian was situated in the library, his laptop screen a cascade of incoming messages. He lifted his gaze as she entered. "Better?" he inquired, progressing. Elena sank into an armchair opposite him, suddenly averse to being alone. "May I ask something of a personal nature?" He replied, "You may always ask. I may not always answer." She then posed her question. "When was the last time you allowed someone to truly see you, not as a business associate, but the man beneath?" The ensuing silence stretched so long she thought he would deflect. Then he delivered a stunning revelation. "I was 19. Her name was Natasha. She perished in a vehicle accident 6 months into our relationship." He explained that in the aftermath, he concluded the cost of intimacy was simply too high. The confession lingered in the air, stark and heavy. Elena had not anticipated such raw honesty. She was at a loss for words. "I'm sorry," was all she could articulate. "It was a very long time ago." Adrian closed the laptop, affording her his complete attention. "So, what is the purpose of your question, Yon?" he asked. "To determine if this entire arrangement remains a performance, or if something authentic is taking root between us." Elena met his gaze without flinching. "And I suspect you are attempting to determine the very same thing." "It is possible," he conceded, moving toward the window. "The contract becomes void if romantic feelings develop, yet it never defines the boundary between romance and fundamental human empathy." "Is that what this is? Empathy for me?" "Yes." The admission was unadorned, a truth he had evidently already processed, a clear deviation from their established terms. And still, here we are. Elena moved to stand beside him, close enough to feel his warmth but not making contact. "So what is our subsequent move?" "We are in an undefined space. The prudent course would be to decelerate, re-establish the rules, and recall that this was always meant to be temporary." Adrian turned to her. "But I'm growing weary of only making the prudent move. Logic constructed my empire, but it also erected my own private prison." "What then is the alternative?" "We simply observe where this leads, with caution, and with our eyes wide open." His hand then found hers, with a hesitancy she had never before witnessed in him. There were no promises, no clear path, just observation. It was likely the least romantic proposition she had ever received. It was also so profoundly honest it made her chest ache. "Agreed," she whispered. "We will observe where this leads." They stood there by the window, hands joined like uncertain adolescents, and Elena recalled Martha's caution about the line between pretense and reality becoming indistinct. She had a sense they had unknowingly crossed that line long ago, and she could not discern if it was the greatest error of her life or the most brilliant choice she had ever made. Outside, the gardens were a symphony of controlled perfection. Every plant was selected for a purpose, for a specific aesthetic. It could have felt artificial, but instead, it simply felt intentional. Something was deemed important enough to get right. Perhaps that was what she and Adrian were doing now, deciding this was important enough to try. The shift in him was minor at first, so subtle it would go unnoticed by a casual eye. Adrian began returning home earlier, more frequently staying for dinner. Their discussions grew longer, veering from safe subjects into the territory of genuine conversation. Their conversation started to drift from business to humanity. Books, forgotten journeys, the substance of a life. He inquired about her degree, and she admitted a buried desire for environmental design. a dream dismissed as impractical. He alluded to a childhood where weakness invited ruin, and she understood not to press further. 3 weeks passed before a package came for her. Inside lay a book on modern landscape architecture. A note in Adrian's precise script read simply, "Thought this might hold your interest? A." The sheer kindness of it formed a knot in Elena's throat she dared not examine. Someone had been listening. Someone remembered. That the simple fact felt so monumental was a shock in itself. She found him later in the kitchen, downing coffee, phone in hand, already sealed inside his daily armor. "Thank you for the book," she began, lifting it. "You really didn't have to." "I know. It was a choice." His gaze met hers for a fleeting moment before shifting away, as if her gratitude was a current he was unequipped to handle. "There's a lecture series on sustainable urban design at the university next month. I thought you might want to attend." Elena just stared at him. "You researched lecture series on landscape architecture. Claire handled the research. I assigned the task." Yet the tips of his ears burned a bright red, the most profoundly human detail she had ever witnessed on him. "If it doesn't interest you, it's irrelevant. Just an idea." "I would love to go." Elena took a seat opposite him with her coffee. "Adrienne, are we becoming friends?" "I suspect that may be the situation," he replied, choosing his words with immense care. "Is that an issue?" "No, just not in the original plan." Elena traced the rim of her mug. "The agreement ruled out romance. It was silent on the matter of friendship. It's just another variable we failed to account for." The edge of Adrian's mouth pulled into something that almost resembled a smile. Friendship might be a greater liability than love. Romance, at least, tends to show warning signals. But what were the signals for this? An obsession with another's well-being, a deep desire for their happiness, the hollow ache when they are gone. His gaze locked onto hers. Buying a book on landscape architecture simply because you know it holds meaning for someone. A strange tightness seized Elena's chest. Those sound like signs we should probably monitor. "Perhaps? Are you planning to?" "Not a chance." His brutal honesty landed like a punch, yet it felt correct for the new, strange space between them. "And you?" "No." Adrian rose, collecting his things. "I have a dinner engagement. I'll be back late, but I'm available tomorrow. We could do something if you'd like." "Like what?" "I'm not sure. Normal human activities. A meal without a business agenda. A film. Your choice." He paused at the door. "I've forgotten how to do things just for enjoyment." Perhaps that's a skill worth reclaiming. After his departure, Elena remained in the kitchen with the book, trying to chart the new terrain between them. This arrangement began as a contract. 12 months, explicit rules, a mutually beneficial deal. But somewhere in the middle, the rules had simply dissolved. They were becoming something unplanned, and Elena couldn't tell if it was wonderful or a catastrophe. It felt remarkably like both. She lost the rest of her day in Adrian's book, taking notes, immersing herself in concepts of space and beauty. It felt like unearthing a piece of her soul she'd buried to be the perfect, compliant daughter. Maya's call came that afternoon, her tone excessively bright. "So, how's life in the palace with the big, intimidating billionaire?" "It's complicated." Elena shifted to her window seat, gazing at the gardens that were beginning to feel like hers. "He bought me a book, Maya, just because he thought I would enjoy it." The monster. The absolute audacity of his thoughtfulness. You understand my point. This was supposed to be a simple, sterile arrangement with a clean exit. Elena drew her knees to her chest. But he is nothing like I imagined, and I am likely not what he anticipated either. So what is your next move? There is no strategy. We're just allowing this to unfold, which is arguably the most illogical decision I've ever made. Or the most courageous, Maya countered. Your entire life has been spent playing it safe, staying quiet, avoiding conflict. Maybe it is time you risked something that truly matters. After they spoke, Elena weighed the risk against the safety, the terrifying unknown against the miserable security she had fled. Her family's version of safety was a cage, a small world, relentless criticism, a slow and certain suffocation. Adrian was a complete unknown. Terrifying, yes, but vibrating with a life her safe world never contained. The following evening, he took her to a small Italian restaurant in a part of town she had never known. No reservations, no strategic seating, no clients to woo, just two people sharing pasta and speaking of unimportant things. This isn't how it's supposed to be, Elena thought, winding pasta onto her fork. In this moment, the pretenses fall away. It is a strange sensation, she considers, but not an unwelcome one. Across the table, his corporate predator facade crumbles. The man who shifts markets seems lost in this simple setting. Elena prods, asking if any of his actions are purely for himself. His reply is telling. Every move is an instrument for a desired result. For a strategist like Adrian, to live without a mission is to be adrift. The objective tonight, then, is to have no objective. He admits he simply desired her company, a truth so direct it shatters Elena's entire perception of herself as someone to be tolerated, competed with, or ignored. To Adrian, the failure of others to recognize her worth is their failing, not hers. And so it began. This wasn't some gentle reassurance from Adrian. It was a raw, desperate cry into the void, proclaiming her a treasure the world was too blind to value. The sound of it struck a chord deep within her, shattering the fragile artifice of their arrangement. For him, the professional boundary they had so carefully constructed had become a meaningless line in the sand. He presented her with an ultimatum for their final 9 months. Live out the lie, or step into the truth of their connection. And the irony? The grand strategist had no strategy for the heart. Admitting the contract that bound them was now little more than ink on a page. His touch was a silent dare, a pathway to a new level with the escape hatch left clearly visible. The choice was hers alone. For Elena, it felt like swapping one gilded cage for another, this new one cleverly disguised as an alliance. Every instinct screamed at her to rebuild the walls he had breached, but the exhaustion of constant vigilance wore her down, and so she made her choice, a desperate leap into what she knew was a raging inferno. Adrian confirmed her fears, cataloging his own toxic flaws. A man obsessed with control, with the emotional depth of stone. Elena simply countered with her own inventory of scars, proposing a pact to burn in the wreckage together. This was them, forging the most broken yet profoundly honest covenant of their lives. When she challenged him to offer a better way, he had no answer. All he could offer was a strange, unfamiliar smile. In its wake, they spoke, for the first time, without pretense or objective. And when they left, their hands remained intertwined, as if this fractured bond between them had become their new center of gravity. In the car, Elena's mind raced. This man would either be her salvation or her complete ruin. Yet she felt a strange lightness, the thrill of being truly seen for the first time. Adrienne had reframed her entire past, declaring her inherent worth, no matter the lies her family had told. Back at the estate, the men of power stood idle, looking as lost and uncertain as boys at their first dance. The cavernous foyer suddenly felt suffocating, holding only the two of them. Elena declared she was leaving, but her feet felt rooted to the marble floor. Adrienne closed the distance, his movements fluid, doing anything to prolong the inevitable. The words they spoke were meaningless. The true purpose was to bridge the space between them. He cupped her face, and in that instant, the mask he wore for the world crumbled into dust. Elena's mind screamed to retreat, but her heart overrode the command. Her kiss was a question, a desperate shot into the darkness. His response was a cataclysm, all his chilling control vaporized, consumed by a pure primal need. The rest of the world simply ceased to exist. "That was a tactical error," Adrian whispered, his voice ragged. "A profound one." In answer, Elena simply kissed him again with a desperate force, as if to sear the moment into her very soul. "We have to end this." "I know." Yet his arms remained locked around her, and she made no move to escape. They stood frozen in the entryway, clinging to one another as if letting go meant oblivion. When reality finally returned, they broke apart, faces flushed, their composure utterly gone. Elena felt as if she had just crossed a bridge in her mind, from which there was no return. "We need to address this," Adrian said. "Tomorrow, we will face it tomorrow." Taking a step back, Elena fought for breath. "I need to go to my room now before I do something more foolish." "More foolish than what just happened?" "Precisely." She turned for the stairs, then glanced back. "You should know I don't regret this." "Neither do I." He looked completely undone, his legendary poise in ruins. "Sleep well, Elena." She barely reached her room before her strength failed, collapsing onto the bed as her fingers traced the memory of his kiss. This was meant to be nothing more than a simple contract. What had begun as a simple business transaction with a clear end date had devolved into a maelstrom of emotion. Her phone vibrated. It was Maya, whose timing was almost supernatural. "How was the meal with your tycoon husband?" Elena typed a reply. "I kissed him." The response was immediate. "Pardon me? Contact me immediately." Instead, Elena turned her phone off and stared into the darkness above. She replayed the evening, trying to discern if she had just salvaged their mission or condemned it entirely. The next morning, the silence was heavy enough to suffocate. Elena descended the stairs to find Adrian in the kitchen. They began a strained dance of avoidance, a desperate attempt to feign normalcy. "Coffee?" he offered. "Yes, please." They sat at the table, a chasm between them, the ghost of last night's chaos hanging in the air. "We should probably discuss what transpired," Adrian began. "That would be the sensible course." Elena curled her hands around her mug. "I have no regrets, but I have no idea what this signifies, or what comes next. I find myself in the exact same position." He raked a hand through his hair, the telltale sign of his unraveling control. Adrian presented their choices. Invoke the contract's escape clause and walk away, or confront this new reality. His startling solution was not to tear up their agreement, but to amend it, to formally incorporate the emotional turmoil into its terms. He began to outline the logistics, new conditions, new contingency plans. Elena understood this was his nature. He sought to contain every problem within the rigid lines of a legal document. He confessed it was the only method he knew to formalize the unknown and manage the risk. She consented, but with one critical revision of her own. The new rules had to allow for the beautiful, unpredictable mess of human fallibility. To her surprise, he accepted her chaotic amendment. They began to list their own broken pieces, laying their deepest flaws upon the table like terms in a negotiation. He would attempt to quantify every emotion into strategy. She would remain a prisoner within the fortress of her past trauma. They agreed to this unhinged experiment, fully aware they were two damaged subjects in a flawed study. Adrienne termed it a provisional trial, refusing to taint it with the soft edges of romance. Their new pact was sealed not with the promise of success, but with a simple vow to try. Elena's wry response perfectly captured the madness of his structured affection. But just as their new world was ratified, a threat from the outside arrived. The chime of the doorbell, and sound unheard of in their isolated existence, signaled trouble for their fragile new beginning. No one ever arrived unannounced. Marcus stood at the entrance, his expression grave, as if heralding the end of days. "Mr. Vulov, a Detective Chen is here. She insists the matter is urgent." In an instant, every trace of warmth vanished from Adrian, replaced by the familiar ice of his corporate persona. "Show her into my office, Elena. Remain here." What is happening? I lack sufficient data, but a 7 a.m. visit from law enforcement is rarely a social call. He was already moving toward his study, his thumbs a blur across his phone. "Marcus, contact our legal counsel." Elena was left alone in the kitchen, a helpless audience to the muted tones emanating from the office. Adrienne's voice was a controlled monotone, the detective's sharp and insistent. The words were indistinct, but the atmosphere was one of pure catastrophe. Something was terribly wrong. When Adrian emerged 20 minutes later, he seemed to have aged a decade. His face was a terrifying blank, a canvas far more frightening than any expression of rage. "What was that about?" she asked. "There has been an incident. A fire at one of my construction sites last night. There was a fatality." His voice was hollow, devoid of all life. "The police believe it was arson, and I am considered a person of interest." The air in the room grew thin, the walls seeming to curve in around Elena. "That's impossible. You would never be capable of such a thing." "My capabilities are irrelevant. All that matters is the narrative they can construct." Adrian's jaw was a hard line of steel. "I have enemies, Elena. People who would celebrate my ruin. This could be their opening gambit." "So what is our move?" "You will do nothing. You will remain entirely removed from this." He was already reaching for his keys, moving toward the door. "I have to confer with my legal team, get ahead of their inquiry, and initiate damage control. This is about to become exceedingly unpleasant." "Adrian, wait. Not now, I cannot." He paused, drawing a long, centering breath. "I'm sorry, I must manage this. Stay here, within the compound." And then he was gone. Elena stood alone in that foyer with a cooling cup of coffee and the intricate, delicate world they had just begun to build. A world that now felt as if it could shatter with a single touch. The remainder of the day was a slow, agonizing crawl. Elena tried to focus on the book Adrian had given her, but the words swam before her eyes. She phoned Maya, who offered all the correct words of comfort, but they changed nothing. She prowled the silent house like a caged animal, while the housekeeper, Sarah, maintained a strained pretense of normalcy. The news broke online shortly after noon. Headlines screamed about a fatal blaze and an arson inquiry, splashing Adrian Volkoff's name alongside terms like negligence and foul play. A wave of nausea washed over Elena as she read the articles, watching strangers tear his name to shreds based on whispers and old grievances. Adrian was absent for dinner. A message appeared around 8 o'clock. Detained with counsel. Do not wait for me. Elena ate alone in the cavernous dining room, staggered by how quickly everything had unraveled. Yesterday, they were mapping a future. Today, he was fighting for his own, while she was a prisoner in his home, utterly powerless. She was preparing for bed when she heard the front door, followed by the heavy sound of footsteps on the stairs. Opening her door, she saw Adrian in the hall, looking completely and utterly broken. He materialized at the hall that evening, the image of a walking collapse, his suit in disarray, his body slumped with an exhaustion that was bone deep. He seemed utterly stunned to find her still awake, a testament to how broken their routine had become. On pure reflex, she moved toward him, her voice low and soothing. "I'm not all right," he confessed, the usual filters gone, speaking of the investigation and the media's relentless assault. When she asked what he needed, he simply stated he was tired of managing the crisis, so she guided him to her room, creating a sanctuary where he could finally set down the impossible weight. The roles had completely inverted. The woman he was meant to be protecting was now shielding him. It was a profound shift, cementing her place by his side in the battle for his life. Elena settles beside him on the bed, maintaining a small distance, but the space between them is charged. "My apologies," Adrian murmurs. "This is far beyond our agreement. This feeling, it was never calculated, but it exists." Elena reaches out in the darkness, her hand finding his. "Whatever this is, we face it together. Isn't that the new rule? We are a team." He squeezes her hand in return. "Teamwork is not my specialty. I am built to resolve things alone." "You will learn. The contract gives us at least 9 more months." Elena shifts closer, resting her head on his shoulder. "For tonight, just sleep. We will solve this mess tomorrow." She feels him finally power down, his breathing deepening as the tension recedes. Elena stays awake long after he sleeps, listening and realizing how deeply entangled she has become. This was meant to be a clean transaction, but there is nothing clean about the need to shelter someone from the world. The week that followed was a chaotic storm of lawyers, investigators, and a desperate campaign to salvage his name. Adrian retreats into his office, a self-imposed banishment broken only by silent, strained meals. The nascent connection between them is smothered by the weight of the investigation, and he reverts to the cold tactician she first met. Elena attempts to grant him space while also signaling her support, a delicate and difficult balance. Sarah provides her with case updates as Adrian remains isolated, and Marcus drives Elena to the lectures he had suggested, a strange performance of normalcy. 10 days later, the situation shifts. Police arrest a disgruntled former employee. The incident was arson, an act of pure revenge. Adrian was the intended victim, not the perpetrator. He is officially exonerated quickly, but his reputation remains in ruins. That night, he finds her in the library, looking like a phantom in his own home. "It's finished," he murmured, the statement lingering in the heavy silence. "The whole ordeal, the claims, it's all concluded." "I'm aware," Sarah informed me, Elena answered, her features a placid mask as she shut her book. And you? Liberated, enraged, utterly spent. He moved across the space, sinking into the armchair opposite her. I need to apologize. For which part, precisely? For closing you off, for reverting to my solitary instincts instead of trusting you. His voice was fractured, raw with a vulnerability he no longer concealed. You called us partners, and I abandoned that the moment danger appeared. You were containing a risk. It is your primary programming. But it's the wrong program, not for something genuine. He leaned forward. My impulse is to distance myself from anyone who matters, and you, Elena, matter. When I detected peril, my reaction was to push you to safety. That isn't a partnership, it's cowardice. Elena set her book aside, kneeling before him to take his hands. You are no coward. You are a man who has endured so much that he built walls just to breathe. These walls were never meant to be permanent, he whispered. I don't know the way to dismantle them, she confessed. We will find a way, side by side. It will be imperfect, filled with errors, words, and likely conflict. Elena's fingers tightened around his. But now it is a shared endeavor, not a solitary war. Those are the new terms. Adriana drew her onto his lap, his embrace so close she could feel the rhythm of his heart. I began this believing my purpose was to save you, to be your anchor. Instead, you gave me a piece of myself I never knew was gone. And what was that? She murmured. A reason to feel like a man, and not merely a function. He pressed his lips to her brow, her cheeks, and finally her mouth. Thank you for not abandoning me when I tried to force you away. Thank you for returning when you could have remained in the shadows. Elena settled her head against his chest. We are two profoundly damaged souls, aren't we? Completely. But perhaps our fractured edges align. Adrian's hold on her intensified. 9 months remain. Do you believe we have a genuine chance? I believe we can attempt it. That was the only vow we ever truly exchanged. Elena drew back, her eyes appraising him. Regarding our agreement, some of its articles may require revision. He retorted, such as? A faint smile touched her lips. The stipulation about separate chambers, it seems superfluous, given our current situation. A hint of color rose in her cheeks, but her gaze remained unwavering. I propose we amend it to reflect our new reality. A slow, knowing grin transformed Adrian's expression. This new reality, where I want to see you when I wake, where this becomes authentic, not a performance. Elena inhaled sharply. The new reality is that I am developing deep feelings for you, and I am finished resisting them. She continued. Listen, I know this is an immense gamble, utterly irrational, and it violates numerous terms of our contract, but it no longer matters. I choose this. I choose you. She framed his face with her hands. If you will choose me in return, dis. Adrian's response was a kiss that communicated more than language ever could. When they parted, his smile reshaped his entire being. I choose you in return, he breathed. I choose this. Regardless of the outcome, I am committed. That night, the roles and pretenses fell away. They were simply two damaged souls choosing vulnerability, choosing to try when every instinct demanded they flee. Elena awoke, sheltered in Adrian's embrace, the morning sun illuminating the gardens that had somehow become their own. In sleep, his features held a tranquility she never witnessed in his waking hours. Their entire arrangement was designed to be fleeting, a 12-month contract with a simple conclusion. But in that moment, observing his quiet breaths, Elena understood she had traversed a point of no return. She loved Adrian Vilov, and rather than inciting panic, the realization felt like a final homecoming. 3 years had now eclipsed that initial 1-year term, yet that specific morning was seared into her memory. It wasn't their staged wedding or any public display. It was an ordinary morning when she awoke to his absence, and her entire world felt irrevocably altered. The facade of separate bedrooms had crumbled somewhere around the 8-month point, making the true beginning impossible for either to name. A quiet conversation on her sofa one night, then another in his study a week after. Eventually, manufacturing distance required far more effort than conceding to the gravitational pull between them. On their first anniversary, they incinerated the contract, a private ritual for two, accompanied by wine valued more than her first automobile. Their true union came 2 months afterward at an unremarkable courthouse, witnessed only by Maya and Marcus, far from any lens. This morning, however, the void in their bed triggered every internal alarm. Adrienne did not simply depart. A message on her phone, delivered 3 hours prior, read, "A situation has arisen, do not fret, I'll be home shortly." In their coded language, "do not fret" was the highest alert for mortal peril, and Elena was an expert in his particular art of minimization. They had forged something genuine from a sterile business transaction. She was preparing coffee when Sarah materialized in the kitchen entrance, her expression so stark that a cold dread gripped Elena. "Mrs. Volkov, a situation has evolved. Adrian insisted I keep you informed." Sarah's tone was unnervingly composed. A clear threat was leveled against him, which cast you into the same shadow. He's managing the fallout, but you had to be aware should we need to alter our defenses. Elena's mug hit the counter, a sharp crack before her trembling hands could betray her. "What kind of threat?" "We're classifying it as credible and severe. That's all I can share." For a fleeting moment, Sarah's professional veneer fractured, showing a sliver of empathy. "He's taking every measure. Marcus is with him. His team is the best in the business. He simply wanted to prepare you for potential disruptions." After Sarah departed, Elena attempted to salvage her day, drafting emails, reviewing garden blueprints. But her focus was gone, her gaze snapping to her phone every 5 minutes for a message that never arrived. By midday, the simmering anxiety had hardened into a cold, sharp rage. She called Adrienne. Voicemail. She dialed Marcus. Nothing. Whatever was unfolding, she was on the outside. The very act meant to shield her only made her feel caged. She was pacing the library when the phone finally pierced the silence, an unknown number glowing on the screen. The target was Elena Vilov. The voice on the line was male, accented, and carried a menace so pure it felt like a physical strike. Her question, "Who is this?" received a terrifyingly simple reply. "I'm the man holding what you value most." He explained that her husband's dealings had angered some very powerful men. He informed her they had Adrienne and then dictated a cold, unyielding list of demands for his safe return. The room began to tilt. She gripped a chair to keep from falling. The voice was a flat, menacing drone, leaving no doubt that her husband's life rested entirely on her obedience. The ransom was $2 million in untraceable cash, with a delivery window of 1 hour. The drop-off terms were absolute. appear at the location alone, or the next call she received would be her last. Her faint whisper, "Yes, I understand," was a concession, an acceptance of terms as her world shattered. The line went silent. A text materialized with coordinates to a warehouse in an industrial wasteland. The perfect stage for a tragedy. She bypassed every emergency protocol, never dialing the authorities or security contacts like Marcus or Sarah. Instead, a primal, adrenaline-soaked instinct ignited, directing her straight to Adrian's private study. Her movements were precise, focused on a singular objective, a concealed vault. They made contact. "I have an address." Their terms were brutally simple. "Come by yourself, or he's dead." Tears burned her eyes, but Elena forced them down. "I can't gamble his life on how quickly the police can respond. I have to be the one who goes." Sarah's expression shifted, a storm of emotions solidifying into cold steel. "I'm alerting Marcus and placing a tracker on your phone now. You'll go to that location, but you won't step into that trap without support." They demanded a loan, "and you will appear to be, but Marcus will be your shadow. If this goes wrong, he intervenes." Sarah was already speaking into her comms. "This is not a negotiation, Elena. You want to save him? We'll do it. But you will not get killed through recklessness." The argument was over. Elena snatched her keys, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs as she sped toward the warehouse district, a duffel bag heavy with cash on the passenger seat. The location was a derelict building, its windows like vacant sockets, its walls scarred with old graffiti. Her phone vibrated. Following Marcus's voice in her ear, she moved toward the entrance. Within the vast, dark warehouse, where light struggled and died against concrete, she saw Adrian. He was marked with fresh contusions, bound and flanked by 3 indistinct figures. Her voice, a thin wire of tension, announced she had the money. The leader, a man who wore his violent nature like a second skin, motioned for her to drop the bag and step back. As his men verified the contents, her entire world compressed to the glint of a steel barrel against Adrian's temple. In that instant, the icy dread inside her underwent a violent change, igniting into a white-hot core of pure fury. This was a loyalty not forged in affection, but born of profound terror, a vow sealed in the crucible of his suffering. So this was the stark truth beneath the corporate facade, a lethal game where people were merely assets to be wagered. "The cash is all here," one of the men grunted. The boss's smile was as frigid as the weapon he held as he nodded. "Mrs. Volkov, your transaction is approved. He will be released once we have departed." Yet Elena remained motionless. "No, he walks out with me, or this deal is void. This negotiation is still open. You'll have to eliminate me as well, because I'm not leaving this place without him." It was an audacious play, a bluff that could easily result in both their executions, but the command from her soul was absolute. "The money is present. We depart together." A flicker of cold fascination crossed his face. "You are either astonishingly brave or profoundly foolish, a true rarity." She met his gaze without flinching. "The terms are now final, both of us, or neither." The silence stretched, every second an eternity. Then, a quiet laugh, and the gun slowly descended. "An intriguing counter-proposal. I believe I will accept." "You possess an incredible amount of nerve, he conceded, motioning for his men to free Adrian. "Take your husband, inform him that our account is settled. His next misstep will not conclude so cordially." As Elena guided Adrian out, each step felt like escaping a firing squad. They broke into the daylight just as Marcus's car screeched to a halt beside them. They scrambled inside. Seeing Adrian's battered state, Marcus accelerated toward the hospital without a word. "That was absolute madness," Adrian rasped. "You were meant to call the authorities, not mount a solo rescue operation. Your point is acknowledged." As her adrenaline subsided, a tremor began. "You are also bleeding profusely. Just remain still and let them examine you." The doctor's verdict: a concussion, fractured ribs, and deep lacerations, but no permanent damage. Adrian was incensed, hating the lost time. Elena merely sat, torn between the urge to hold him and the impulse to strike him for the hell he'd put her through. "Explain the abduction," she said, the moment they were alone in the ER. "It was a planned ambush. It happened after my meeting. A failure within my own security detail." Adrian touched a bandage on his temple, flinching. "They work for a man I neutralized 3 months back. Apparently, they harbored a grudge. People often find your business methods to be quite personal. Perhaps that is a weakness in your strategy." Her voice trembled slightly, betraying her analytical tone. "Perhaps." He placed his hand on hers. "What you did was reckless. It was impulsive and astronomically foolish." "I had a contingency. Sarah contacted Marcus. He was tracking my location. A support team was 2 blocks away." Her fingers tightened on his, conveying what words could not. "But I understand. The risk was enormous. So was our marriage agreement, and that has been effective thus far." "Functional." A genuine pained smile touched his lips. "That might be the most clinical assessment of our existence I have ever heard." "Emotions are a liability. I prefer a working alliance that can withstand the occasional hostage crisis. So picture this. They are in a sterile hospital room, clinging to one another as if they are the only 2 souls left. Elena's mind is reeling, flashing back to that ironclad business contract they both signed 2 years ago. The one with the explicit "no emotions" clause. But love, it seems, ignores such contractual fine print. It had slipped in quietly with the morning coffee, in the small details he remembered, in the way she could interpret his silence. It took her an entire year to confess it even to herself. But now, having just purchased his life, she understood that subtlety was a luxury she could no longer afford. "I love you," she said without preamble. "In the event you were uncertain." And Adrian just looked at her, every defense stripped away, utterly raw and exposed for the very first time. And he answered without hesitation, "I know. I have for a while, and I love you too." This admission was simultaneously his greatest fear and his deepest salvation. He drew her closer, mindful of his injuries. "None of this was by design, but I am so grateful you stormed into my life and refused to go." She replied, deadpan, "I am persistent." He smiled. "Yes, it is one of your most formidable traits." They were discharged from the hospital armed with prescriptions, Elena driving while he fought to stay conscious. The house was just as she had left it in her frantic departure, but the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. They had faced something that should have destroyed them, and it had forged them into something stronger than any legal document. The next few months were dedicated to reinforcement. Adrian had a fortress-level security system installed. Elena began combat training, vowing to never feel that powerless again. They finally came to terms with the chaotic nature of his world and began to truly live within it. They started visiting places that weren't on any public map. Dinner evolved from a strategic debriefing into genuine conversation. Mornings became a time for connection, not just for battle preparations. That spring, Elena unveiled her community garden initiative, transforming a blighted urban lot into a place of beauty. Adrienne supplied the funding and political leverage, but the vision was entirely hers. At the opening ceremony, watching children play in a space she had willed into existence, Elena felt a profound sense of peace. This was the victory she had always sought. Not the approval of her family, but the power to create something good. And to shatter the moment, her sister Victoria appeared. She looked altered. The flawless facade was intact, but there were fine cracks just beneath the surface. "Impressive," Victoria remarked, her gaze sweeping over the garden. "A clever use of space." Elena simply braced herself for the inevitable veiled insult. "I came here to apologize." It felt like every word tore something from Victoria on its way out. An apology for the wedding, for a history of cruelty, for failing her sister. Elena scanned for the familiar lie in her eyes, but found only the ghost of a person. "What happened to you?" "Life. The pressure of being flawless," she explained, "is an unbearable load that shatters you when it falls." Victoria's smile was a fragile thing. "My husband was a saint to the world and a demon behind closed doors. I left 6 months ago, and now I'm learning to exist without an audience. I'm sorry that was your reality. Don't be. I authored my own tragedy." Her gaze fell on the children, a look of profound, aching loss. "I was envious of you. Even as I pushed you away, you had something true. It scared me to death." A familiar rage flickered in Elena. "I was a pariah because you made me one." "I know," Victoria admitted, her gaze unwavering, "and I'm sorry. I don't ask for your forgiveness. I haven't earned it. But I needed you to know I see what I did. I'm trying to be different." Elena regarded this broken reflection of her sister, and a lock turned within her. An apology couldn't undo the past, but rage was its own prison. "I can't let you into my life," Elena said slowly, "but we could have coffee. That could be a start." "It's more than I have a right to ask." For the first time, Victoria's smile seemed to touch her eyes. After she was gone, Adrienne held Elena. "What's on your mind?" "Just taking it in." "I never thought Victoria would simply lay down her arms." Elena leaned into his embrace. "I'm not sure about forgiveness, but I think I can stop her ghost from haunting me. That feels more liberating." Adrienne kissed her temple. "What you've grown here is separate from them. This is all you." Elena surveyed the garden, her creation, then looked to Adrienne and the life they had spun from a 12-month agreement. She had been the invisible daughter, the forgotten sister. She believed worth was something bestowed by others. But here, with the man who had always seen her, she understood. Value wasn't a gift to be given or a trophy to be won. Our protagonist had undergone a core reprogramming. She realized her worth was not his creation, but a truth he helped her see. This new paradigm dissolves the old power dynamic, authenticating their connection. The concept of home was redefined, trading a toxic family for a universe built with Adrienne. 3 years post-contract, she embraced their chaotic, dangerous existence as something exquisite. The closing image is one of profound peace. They share a simple meal, discussing trivial things, showing she is fully inhabiting a reality that began as a transaction but is now unequivocally real. Adrienne's push for an official marriage was a strategic masterpiece, a maneuver to paste a romantic narrative over a business arrangement. His entire performance was about projecting an image of soulmates to the world, a calculated move to satisfy Elena's deep-seated hunger for acceptance. That warmth in her chest was a textbook indicator of a trauma bond, the classic symptom of a captive developing affection for her captor. The wedding preparations were executed with surgical precision. Their circle, Maya, Marcus, and Sarah, were assigned roles in marketing this flawless fiction. The wedding was a hermetically sealed event, a soundstage for performing the ideal romance to a select group of onlookers. Elena's decision to exclude her parents was a necessary amputation for her own psychological survival. Her sister Victoria's appearance was merely an unplanned disruption in their protracted family conflict. The ceremony, with its bespoke vows and symbolic gestures, was engineered for peak manufactured authenticity. When the final words were spoken, Elena's response confirmed she had fully internalized the narrative and adopted her new persona. During the reception, her friend Maya, emboldened by wine, toasts Elena's reckless gambles as courageous. This moment perfectly mirrored Elena's own struggle to believe she was the author of her fate, a common trait in the perpetually overlooked. A 3-year retrospective reveals a tectonic shift. She evolved from a family outcast into a woman who neutralized assassins and constructed an empire. Her asking Adrian about regrets was no idle question. It was a diagnostic, a search for hairline fractures in their shared foundation. Adrian's reply was a finely honed weapon. He began with feigned vulnerability, then delivered a polished monologue about his fundamental need for her, his entire performance about wasted years and being terrified was designed to draw Elena closer, positioning her as his redeemer. The claim that she made him feel alive was a classic maneuver, burdening her with the responsibility for his emotional state. As he talked, Elena's mind re-edited their history, from the cold, 5-word deal to the contract's immolation 2 years later, as she fully embraced the story she needed to be true. Understand this. Elena has fundamentally rewired her own mind to believe she was the ultimate prize, not just Adrian's choice over Victoria. She has reframed the narrative, seeing him not as a predator, but as the sole person who recognized her inherent worth. This grants her a powerful, if distorted, sense of agency. Her great proclamation of self-awareness is filtered through their shared warped reality. Her scripted-sounding "I love you," followed by their intimacy, was the final move in her psychological reconstruction. The proof. Her last thoughts weren't of her blood. Her entire world had collapsed to a single point named Adrian. Elsewhere, Victoria attempts to salvage a life constructed from deceit. In other rooms, contracts are being signed, imposing a fragile order on the chaos of human connection. But here, in the world she forged, Elena Vulov has found her own true north. This radical stillness comes not from external validation, but from an inner compass that sanctifies every risk she took. The first stars ignite, tiny pyres in the darkness, each a self-contained universe, indifferent to any observer. For years, Elena required an audience to exist. But a star does not burn to be seen. It burns because it is a star. The fire was always hers. She just had to turn away from those who were blind to see it. Then, his hand finds hers, a solid anchor in the vast silence. They simply stand, sharing the quiet. Their union began as a contract, but what grew between them transcended legal terms. It became a pact, an alliance, a joint conquest. The life they forged looked nothing like her initial designs. yet it filled an emptiness she never knew she had, rendering her old blueprints obsolete. Finally, Adrienne murmurs that it's time to leave. Elena casts a final glance at the garden, a living testament to a life she carved into being with pure will and a refusal to be a footnote. She squeezes his hand, a silent agreement. Yes, it's time to go home.